Practice reports today were what I would say is no bueno. Let's go ahead. Let's go through everything because it looks like we actually should have a considerable amount of people missing this weekend. So Deontay Johnson not listed on the injury report. Can you start Deontay Johnson this week? No, you cannot. This is a receiver that's probably the number 2 option in a rush first offense. And we've seen with Adams, with Amari, with Hopkins, these guys typically are going to start off a little bit slower when they are transitioning teams here. Lamar Jackson doesn't practice again on Thursday. The report is he's out with a knee and back injury. So this is extremely frustrating. I'm going to assume that Lamar is still playing. I mean, what we can do here is we can go ahead and look at updated lines for this Denver Broncos game. But, I mean, expectations would be, of course, that if we are looking at implied team totals, if there was a very real threat of Lamar missing this week, what we would see is you would see that the projections with this Baltimore Ravens offense should go down dramatically. Right now, looking at this, sportsbooks currently still have the Ravens as the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. So, yeah, probably a spot in which Lamar will be playing, but you hope to see him at practice on Friday. Dallas Goedert doesn't practice again on Thursday, so it seems like Dallas Goedert will miss another week here with a hamstring. Zamir White does not practice on Thursday. Obviously, if you have Zamir White on your roster, I don't know what you're doing. You're going to go ahead, you're going to drop him, and you are going to, I guess if you have Madison, can consider playing Madison this week. It's a better matchup than what he had last week against the Chiefs. And then T. Higgins officially doesn't practice again on Thursday, so my expectations coming into the week was that T. Higgins would be playing. But now that you have Higgins missing practice on both Wednesday as well as Higgins missing practice on Thursday, in my mind, I do think that things are trending towards T. Higgins not playing this week, which does friggin' suck. Will Levis gets in a limited practice again on Thursday. If you actually look at sportsbooks at the moment, they are telling us that the Titans offense should be better than what we have seen as of late. Like the Titans are projected out to score about 20.75 points this week, which is right ahead of what you have with the Texans, with the Colts, with the Giants, with the Raiders, with the Broncos, with the Jags, with the Bucks, and the Panthers. So they are pricing in a little bit of a bounce back here for this Titans offense. Calvin Ridley gets in a full practice. Tony Pollard does not practice, however, so it looks like Pollard is maybe a risk to miss this week. So if you have Tajee Spears out there on the waiver wire, and if Spears does end up playing, I would say that Spears is 100% worth the pickup. And honestly, you could look to play him this week as well, I mean, depending on how things are. But anyway, our next update will be Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Etienne, and Gabe Davis all getting in a limited practice on Thursday. Etienne's been practicing every single day for the past 3 weeks. I don't know if they'll ever decide to play the dude. But, I mean, getting in back-to-back practices here for both Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis is a positive. I'm assuming that you have a shot that Brian Thomas Jr. plays this week. If you are looking at sportsbooks at the moment, they currently have the lowest scoring offense in the NFL this week as the Patriots, second lowest scoring offense as the Panthers, third lowest scoring offense, the Bucks, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they are kind of pricing in that you may see a offense without their top weapons, but clearly you just have so many players banged up in Jacksonville in general. Derek Carr will be playing. Derek Carr gets in a limited practice. If you're going over to sportsbooks at the moment, the only offenses that project to be better this week than the Saints are the Lions, the Vikings, the Eagles, the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Falcons, the Ravens, and the Bills. So Derek Carr will be back in. Obviously, it's a phenomenal matchup here as well. So I think you can go ahead and you can look to play Chris Olave. Lazard going to be on the IR, will miss at least 4 weeks. Amari gets in a limited practice. We're going to assume that Amari continues to expand his role in Buffalo. David Njoku doesn't practice on Thursday. This is something to monitor. Obviously, this is an injury that David Njoku dealt earlier in the season. Expectations in my mind is still that David Njoku will be playing. Obviously, the veteran, you're a little less worried about him missing the practice in comparison to maybe a rookie. Going beyond this, looking at what we have, Jordan Love gets in a limited practice on Thursday. Adam Thielen gets in a limited practice. We don't even talk about Thielen. Maybe we should spend some time with Love here. I just have no idea what to expect here with this Packers team. Right now, this is an offense that projects to have an implied team total of 23 points. Typically, you're seeing the Packers project outscore 27-28. You could take this as one of two ways. One, maybe it is priced in that you are going to maybe get Malik Willis under center. You could make an argument, it's just because the Detroit Lions defense is good. That's why sportsbooks are so low on the Packers this week. I don't know. I think that I wouldn't be surprised at all if they hold out Jordan Love, roll into the bye in week 10, make sure that he is 100% healthy. Jonathan Brooks gets in another full practicing on Thursday. Expectations in my mind at this point should be that Jonathan Brooks is going to be playing this week. Would I start Brooks? No. Would I start Hubbard? No. I think it's a committee and a horrendous offense. Brooks would definitely be the guy that I prefer rest of season because I think we're chasing the ceiling there. We already talked about Lamar not practicing, T. Higgins not practicing. Bucky Irving is going to manage the toe injury all season. Is there anything else that is worth pointing out? Tyrone Tracy gets in a limited practice on Thursday. Obviously, extremely positive if you're looking at Tracy trending towards playing this Sunday. Would be a decent matchup going up against Washington. My hesitation, of course, is if we're looking at Tracy, this was a concussion on Monday night, so you have one less day to clear concussion protocol. So I would be surprised if Tracy plays, but getting in a limited practice on Thursday's phenomenal news. And honestly, he very easily could play here. But I think that should be it for all the updates that we have this Thursday. Let's go ahead and we are going to be diving into some teams here. Obviously, we have a lot of people who signed up to Underdog. Use code FLOCK to take advantage of this. So appreciate you. If you ever wanted to ask a question over there on flockfantasy.com, you could always hit the Ask a Question link in the live chat. That will take you over to the page where you can send in a super message, starts a question, trade question, or team review, whatever you are wanting. Again, I do want to reiterate, you can send in a question literally at any time of the day. The way that we have set this up over there on the site is even if you are not in the live stream when your question gets answered, you're going to have an automated custom link that immediately gets sent to you that takes you to the exact time that your question was answered in that live stream. So you can ask a question over there on the site whenever you want, and that day it will be answered in a stream. You can find the button up at the top right that says expert advice. That's where you would send it in. And if you wanted that team review, we do have an offer as well, where if you want me to review your team for free on a live stream, you can always go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK. Or if you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, on top of that, you're going to be getting the free CJ Stroud pick, more than less than half total yard for the game tonight. If you signed up after the game tonight, it would be a Jalen Hurts free pick, more than less than half total yard for Sunday, and a free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single night. Just make sure that you go through the link in the live chat and or description. But let's move this back over and let's get into our first free team review here. This one's going to be coming out from kdthewiz. Appreciate you. I'm going to be really excited to go ahead and check this out. This is going to be a 14-team format. So with this being a 14-team league, the depth's going to matter a little bit more. Options on the waiver wire will be a little bit worse. We're currently 9th. Top 8 go to the playoffs. Okay, so if top 8 go to the playoffs, we're obviously chilling here. If this was a league where only 6 teams go, then definitely we would be a little bit more concerned. But we are offered Amon-Ra or Cup and JSN for my Lamb and Pacheco. Nope, auto reject. Lamb just completely different tier. JSN's not moving the needle there. Also, feelings on Higgins. Feel like I need to trade him with all these missed games. So if you were to sell Higgins, obviously you're moving off of him at very much a low point. But specifically here, I am not going to fault you to pin it on the team, because if you are currently out of the playoff picture and we are having to do everything that we can to get in, Higgins looks like he's slated to miss this week. And at the same time, Higgins looks like he is going to be missing week 12 as well with the bye week. So I would be a little concerned about Higgins. Right now, we are currently third in the league analyzer, so we should have a considerable amount of value on this roster. And pulling this up, we are also dealing with the Jordan Love injury, which obviously is very frustrating. We do have Stafford, though, who could go out there and have a ton of passing volume now that you have both Cooper Kupp as well as Puka Nacua back in. So, I mean, we are going to be fine at quarterback in the short term. And obviously, Love is a very strong option here in a 14-team league in the long term. Now, going over to what we have at running back, we are currently rolling with Devon Achane, Chase Brown. So I'm viewing Achane for sure as a top 14 RB. So I think we have a solid RB1. I understand that Achane maybe was a little bit worse earlier in the year when we had the injury specifically to Tua. But going into the future, Achane should be an extremely strong RB1 every single week. Chase Brown, in my mind, is very clearly a top 28 running back at the minimum, and honestly could be a little bit better than that as well. We have Pacheco as a running back that gives you the playoff upside. I mean, it's a league where you have 8 of 14 teams making the playoffs, and we are currently 4-4. So I don't think we need to be panicking and thinking like, oh my gosh, I need to win right this second. Like, I do think that there is some merit to hold on to Pacheco here, unless you were to get a very nice price tag, but I don't think like the swap to JSN does it for us. And then we have Braylon Allen as the premium handcuff. We have Emmanuel Wilson as the premium handcuff as well. So what I would do here at running back for sure, especially as Pollard missed practice today too, is I think I would go ahead and I would drop Emmanuel Wilson and pick up Tajee Spears. Or you know what? I actually don't know if I would drop Emmanuel Wilson just because of going over to the wide receiver position. At the bottom end, you have a couple of these guys. I mean, primarily just Juju Smith-Schuster, that I don't see a path for him really making a difference with your team in particular. Where if you are looking at what you have with Juju, he didn't practice today. We should expect Juju doesn't play this week. Even when he does come back in, at this point, he looks like he's the fourth option in a low-volume passing attack behind Worthy, Hopkins, and Kelsey. So in my mind, I think pivoting from Juju over to Tajee Spears is an absolute no-brainer. Like if Spears were to play this week and you were to potentially have no Pollard, I think Spears is an immediate start for this team. Going over to wide receiver, it is a brutal spot in which Deontay Johnson finds himself in Baltimore. And I understand a lot of people are saying with the Deontay Johnson video saying, oh, it's better than Bryce Young. Yeah, but you knew he wasn't going to be playing with Bryce Young rest of season. We already had the report that he was going to get dealt. So I think out of all the potential landing spots he could have found himself in, this is one of the worst ones. Instead of selling Higgins, I mean, if you could find somebody that's like the landing spot of Deontay Johnson, which I have heard some of those people in my comment section screaming at us, I think that would be a very interesting player to potentially try to get out of here. Where if you could move Deontay and you could possibly pivot over to a receiver that's just been much worse so far this season, but at the same time, his situation's changing for the better, like Tank Dell, or really just any low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. Maybe even go through and trade him for like DJ Moore, trade him for somebody like Darnell Mooney. I would love to make that pivot if we could. The depth at wide receiver, you are just fine having Ricky Pearsall, Jalen McMillan. I do think you have a considerable amount of upside. Let me get the dog out of here, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. But this question, I'm sorry, the tight end position, we are looking at what we have with Kincaid. With Kincaid, tight end that we can start every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. I mean, if we are looking at what you have with Kincaid in terms of the top end range of outcomes, I do still think he could potentially be a top 5 tight end if we start to just see this Bills team throw the ball a little more aggressively, which is what we've actually had since Amari's come over. So I understand the thought process and wanting to go through and wanting to grab another wide receiver depth piece in a league like this, especially with the T. Higgins injury. But for me, I don't think the way you go about it is making that CeeDee Lamb trade. Where, I mean, maybe if you wanted to pivot from CeeDee Lamb and go and get Amon-Ra and JSN or Kupp and JSN, you can do that just because the depth matters. But I think you're just giving up way too much if you're also including Isaiah Pacheco in this deal. I mean, if you could maybe go from like T. Higgins and Isaiah Pacheco and get Cooper Kupp there, I think you could be looking at that as a viable play as well. Just for me, I really don't see any interest in trading away Lamb, who's already through the bye week, who gives you such a high floor ceiling combo, who has a good playoff schedule as well. And then also, like I said, I would drop Juju Smith-Schuster for Tajee Spears. Pollard misses practice. Spears misses practice as well. There is definitely a possibility that this is a Julius Chestnut type game, but I mean, if you were to see a situation in which Spears plays and Pollard doesn't, I think that Spears is a very easy start for this roster. So drop Juju, pick up Spears, don't make the Lamb deal. And if you were to make a trade, if that team wants Pacheco, I think we try to instead send them like Pacheco and Higgins, and we go get St. Brown, we go get Kupp that way. But I don't know if we want to be including Lamb in it. But I really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. Again, thank you so much, my friend, for being a member of the flock, supporting the channel. And I'm definitely wishing you the best of luck here rest of season. I wouldn't panic at all. I mean, you're 4-4 in a 14-team league where 8 teams make the playoffs. I think we got it. Now, going over to our next free team review, this one's coming out from Alex. Says, how can I solidify this championship? Any trades you see that we can do? So here, team name is Breece for Impact. We are the second in the league analyzer. This is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format, 12-team league. So wide receiver depth typically is not going to matter. I mean, whenever we get the ability to sell wide receiver depth in a 2-for-1 deal to go get an upgrade elsewhere, that is something that we are wanting to look at. Obviously, having the elite quarterback is going to make a very big difference in this format. So having Jalen Hurts, I really do like to see. We don't need to roster another quarterback when we have Hurts, of course. This is a QB that is going to be playing every single week. He's already through the bye. I think you have no hesitation here. Going over to Breece, I mean, we have the top end RB1. Beyond this, we are looking at Chase Brown, who's expanding the role in Cincinnati. Does appear to be the starting option. We have Jonathan Brooks, who's finally back in. We get the long-term upside of Pacheco on a 6-2 team where we are trying to optimize for the upside down the stretch. I really like this combination of running backs. I understand that maybe we have Braylon Allen here just in case you get a Breece Hall injury. But for me, I honestly think I would prefer to potentially go out there and make a pivot where if you could cut Braylon Allen and pick up Zach Moss off the waiver wire, I would look to do that. I mean, with Moss, he's in a better offense. Also, you're looking at a player in which you do just naturally have a larger role already. And then, of course, you saw the handcuff appeal where if anything were to occur to Chase Brown, then immediately Zach Moss is a must-start running back every single week. So, yeah, I would cut Braylon Allen for Moss. Going over to wide receiver, it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, so the depth doesn't matter too much. We are currently sitting with Justin Jefferson. So we have the elite alpha we can start every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. We have Chris Olave as well. So when we're looking at Olave, now that Carr is coming back in, an extremely strong wide receiver too. Higgins definitely in the short term doesn't look super exciting. In the long term, you potentially could view Higgins as a top end option for the fantasy football playoffs, which is exactly what we're looking for, right? I mean, this is a team in which you only start 2 receivers in a flex, so we are trying to optimize specifically for what you have with the depth here. So overall, I think it is. Oh, Danny says that they just got a deal done. I'll check in on what the deal is. I didn't see it, my guy. But overall, at wide receiver, I think you're in a really good spot. I think that somebody like Josh Downs is actually a really good example of a player that looks really exciting post Anthony Richardson news that a lot of people are rightfully excited for. But for you, with how strong your roster is in this league format, Downs probably is going to make a massive difference. So, I mean, if we could potentially take Josh Downs and send him in a 2-for-1 deal elsewhere to get an upgrade inside the starting lineup, specifically at running back. Like, if you could possibly send, say, the combo of Josh Downs and Chase Brown to go up and get a high-end RB2, try to go get at somebody in the Aaron Jones range, I mean, it would be an absolute no-brainer. And if you were able to open up a roster spot that way, the guy that we're going to look at grabbing additionally off the waiver wire specifically would be another running back with Jaylen Warren, just because this is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. And I do view Warren as that RB where if you were to see an injury in front of him, then all of a sudden he does turn into a player that actually can make a difference here in your lineup. But let me go ahead and then at tight end, obviously, we're elite. We have McBride. I mean, we're going to have to open up another roster spot to just play a different tight end during the bye week here in Arizona. But it's not something we're optimizing for right now, right? It just goes back to maybe when you're this strong with this roster, going through and making a 2-for-1 deal does make sense where we can. And then if you make that 2-for-1 deal, it's easier to pick up that tight end for the week 11 bye week with Arizona. Now, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think there's anything else with this team. It's an extremely strong roster. Obviously, we are 6-2. I mean, if you could go out there and if you could potentially add in Nico Collins at a reasonable price tag, obviously we would. I mean, if you could send like Olave and Higgins to go get Nico, it'd be an absolute no-brainer. But the issue is, like, it's a 6-2 team where we kind of want to be selling the wide receivers with short-term production for long-term upside. And as we look at this, we kind of already have some of those names with like T. Higgins on this roster. So I think you're in a great spot, and I think you are just chilling as is. But let's move this over. And Danny just made a trade in the Flock League. This is actually a trade with the person I am playing this week with Joe. And looking at this deal, Danny sends Wan'Dale Robinson, Tyler Algier, and a couple fab dollars. Or no, I guess Danny gets fab dollars here. And Danny gets Xavier Worthy. Can y'all spam the chat? What side would y'all rather have? Would y'all rather have Xavier Worthy or Wan'Dale Robinson and Tyler Algier? Worthy or Wan'Dale and Algier? What side are you rolling with? Austin says mid for mid. Yeah, I mean, what I said is down here. I said 2 relevant teams. What is there to say? So looking at this, let's see what people got to say. Worthy, Algier, Worthy. Wan'Dale, Worthy. Garbage, Worthy. Worthy is definitely the winning side, right? But it's another example of Danny trying to get the best of Joe here and trying to do anything that he can to not fall into irrelevance. But Danny, all I know is you're looking at your superior here. I'm 5-3. You're 4-4, my guy. You better hope you don't lose this week, because if Sal beats you, that's going to be a bad look. It's going to be a bad look. Danny, I know you win, but it takes you from The question is, I mean, we obviously know Danny wins this deal. The question is, can Danny now all of a sudden be a winning team? Because he hasn't been able to be a winning team up until this point, which is really interesting. And he says I'm 5-5 in 2 weeks. I played Joe this week, my friend. Your boy is pretty much 6-3. It's already penciled in. But let's go ahead and dive into our next one. Says, just wanted to say thank you. Your buy low, sell high suggestions allowed me to create this juggernaut of a team. I know we need to upgrade at quarterback, but it's been tough making a trade with anybody worth trading for. The only players still drafted on my team are Baker and Williams. Thanks again. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate you. I'm going to be excited to check this out. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start set question here, my guy. This is the number one team in the league analyzer by far. So I already know what we are going to do is we're going to pull this up and go, great team. I don't see any way to make it better. Realistically speaking, whenever we have a team that is by far and away better than the rest of the league, it is going to be tough to make too many adjustments. But obviously, I mean, here we see immediately that we want to upgrade quarterback. But yeah, it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. So wide receiver depth, not going to matter a ton. Actually, having an elite quarterback will make a pretty big difference. Baker had been an elite quarterback up until this point. The issue is going into the future, it is going to be much tougher to project that out now that you have no Godwin, now that you have no Evans. I mean, even you see it this week, obviously a tough matchup going up against KC, but sportsbooks are projecting out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be a bottom 5 offense in the NFL in total points scored this week. So definitely the plan here is to upgrade QB. The question is, how do we do it? Going over to running back, we have my RB1 and RB2 in fantasy football at the moment. We have Saquon Barkley and Kyron Williams, absolute juggernauts with large roles, very little to no hesitation at all. You have Jonathan Brooks as a viable depth now, Algier as a premium handcuff. If I were looking at what we have with, say, Kenneth Gainwell down there on the bench, I understand that Gainwell is the direct backup to Barkley. But my thing is, even if Barkley were to miss, are you excited to go through and are you excited to start him? Probably not. I don't think you would even get Gainwell in. So for me, I think you can find a better waiver wire option here potentially. Looking at running back, like we've already seen, if James Cook misses, Ray Davis is an absolute must-start name. So if you could, I would pivot over from Kenneth Gainwell to Ray Davis off the waiver wire. Going over to wide receiver, you're going to be looking at the combo of CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, and Zay Flowers. So, I mean, very clearly the play, if possible, is to go through and try to find somebody that views some upside here still with Flowers going into the future. I mean, with Flowers, this is a receiver in which you're in a rush first offense. Now you have added in target competition in the form of Deontay. Well, I still expect Flowers to be the wide receiver 1. He's just somebody that would never hit your starting lineup here. We already have Lamb, Kupp, Smith, Waddle, all through their respective buys. So I think the very clear play is we take Flowers, we take Cade Otton, and we go and we try to get an elite level QB. So looking at the teams that have top end quarterbacks, this team probably doesn't need a tight end. They have Evan Ingram. They don't need a receiver. This team has a banged up T. Higgins. Amari Cooper, maybe he's a little banged up here. They're starting like Amari, Mooney, and then Khalil Shakir down in their flex spot this week. You could very easily see an argument to be made that this team's in a spot in which they should trade away a quarterback. Now, obviously, the guy that we would want would be Lamar. The issue is Flowers won't get as close to Lamar Jackson. So one thing that we could look to do is go, well, okay, if we have this much depth at wide receiver, instead of trying to get rid of our bottom end wide receiver depth, such as Zay Flowers, maybe if instead we're willing to give away a wide receiver one that people will be excited about. Obviously, Kupp is very exciting. I mean, you should be excited about him. Everybody is. If you go ahead and you send Kupp as well as Jared Goff to go get to Lamar Jackson, to this team that desperately needs wide receiver, and they have Jared Goff as well. I'm sorry, they have Jordan Love as well. I think that could be very interesting. Going over, this team has Josh Allen. Their wide receiver one with Brian Thomas is banged up. Their wide receiver two is Harrison. Their third option is Jerry Jeudy. I mean, this is a player that could definitely use an additional option at the quarterback position. David Njoku misses practice. Maybe they think Njoku's going to miss time here as well. I mean, if you could go through and send like the combo of Flowers, K-Dot, and Jared Goff to just pay up and go get Josh Allen, I would really like to do that on your roster where we have the absolute juggernaut. So the very minimum, we want to go ahead and we want to try to, I mean, very minimum, we don't need to try. We can just do it. You cut Kenneth Gainwell, you go pick up Ray Davis. And we're also obviously trying to go out and get that elite level quarterback. I mean, obviously, it's preferable if you could just go ahead and trade away, say, Zay Flowers, but it's much easier said than done there. What you probably end up having to do is you probably end up needing to go ahead and move off of a player like, I don't know, Cooper Kupp, sadly. But I really appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, I did hook you up with that free trade question and that free start sit question. So if you have anything additional you want to send my way, don't hesitate to. Now, our next question coming out from CJ, coming out with a massive dono. Really appreciate you, my guy. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start sit question. That way, in case you wanted to send anything else my way, you're more than able to. It says, hey, Mason, going strong for the start at 6-2. Looking to gear up for the playoffs. I feel a little bit shaky at tight end and receiver. I have a couple of expiring or middle of the pack players that are hard to sell, but also hard to drop. What do you think? First thing I want to say is there are only two real contenders in this league. I mean, you can see this immediately with the league analyzer. It's us at 1, and it's the Hail Mary team. The Hail Mary team's 3-5 somehow, but they have Gibbs, Bijan, Chase, Nico, Brian Thomas, Harrison. This is a phenomenal roster. This is also a league in which there are only 10 teams, so there should be quality waiver wire options, but also at the same time, you can start up to 4 wide receivers weekly, so it's not like wide receiver depth is completely meaningless. Now, starting off at quarterback, we are sitting with an elite QB. We have Daniels. We have Kyler as well. I mean, if you could get a great price tag for moving on from Kyler Murray, obviously you would. We don't necessarily need him, but at the same time, it's a 10-team format. What I've seen with Kyler trades so far this season is nobody's really going out there and trading for Kyler. So you're probably chilling with them on your roster as is. And trying to think if there's anything else. You could potentially do your quarterback. No, you're probably just playing Kyler in week 14 for the Daniels bye. I mean, if you could get some great price tag for Kyler, again, we would. Now, going over to what we have when it comes to running back. We're sitting with 2 top 3 running backs rest of season with the combo Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. You love to see it. We have running back depth pieces such as Kareem Hunt, Tony Pollard, Isaiah Pacheco, and Jordan Mason. So I think the vast majority of teams should not look to cut Mason. I think Mason has too much upside just in case maybe CMC either re-injures himself, maybe the reports about him playing this week are a lie, and he does end up missing more time, and Mason heals up after the bye and is good to go with the shoulder injury. But specifically with your roster here, I do think that Mason would probably be the final guy on my team. And you have a great option on the waiver wire with Jonathan Brooks right now. So for me, I would go ahead and I'd probably drop Jordan Mason in favor of picking up Jonathan Brooks. Going over to wide receiver, we have 2 top We had 2 wide receiver ones the rest of the season with Tyreek, Cup. Amari's going to get better as time goes on. We have Dell, Pittman. Wide receiver depth isn't incredible here. And again, I do want to reiterate, this is a league in which you can start 4 wide receivers weekly. Going over to tight ends, this is the quote-unquote weak spot on the roster. But it does look like Cade Otton is just an absolute crusher until we see otherwise, with no Evans, with no Godwin. Laporta at the same time has been serviceable. So if there was anywhere to upgrade with this team, it's 1 by dropping Jordan Mason, by 2 trying to sell Kyler. One thing that you can do is this team here is dealing with the Nico injury. They're dealing with the Harrison injury. I'm sorry, the Brian Thomas Jr. injury. So if we could potentially buy Nico Collins from them at a reasonable price tag, I 100% would want to. They are currently sitting with Bo Nix, so they are effectively streaming the quarterback position. They're 3-5, so they may need points right this second, whereas obviously we're 6-2, so we can afford to just think about the long-term upside Nico has in the playoffs. So if we could try to send them maybe like Cooper Kupp and Kyler Murray to go get 2 Nico Collins, I could very easily see that being a deal that helps out both teams. Other than that, going through and looking at what you could potentially do, if you wanted to try to tier up to an elite level tight ends, that would be interesting. Obviously, it just comes down to like, what does that price point look like? I mean, if you could go and get Bowers from this team by sending them Kyler Naughton or Kyler and Laporta for Bowers, that'd be a no-brainer for us. Going through and looking at other teams with strong tight ends, this team has McBride. If we're looking at what they could potentially use, maybe they could use a wide receiver depth piece. Maybe they could use a running back here like Pollard. I mean, if you could somehow send Pollard and Otton or Pollard and Laporta to go get to McBride, it'd be a no-brainer, just much easier said than done. This team here has Kittle at tight ends. Right now, they're starting Kamara and Bucky at running back. They felt like they needed some help. You could send them, like, they're maybe starting Herbert at quarterback. You can maybe send them Kyler, Pollard, Laporta, and see if we can get to Kittle that way. But obviously, those are the moves we're looking to make. We are trying to see if we can move off of the QB, get the elite tight ends, or potentially go and pivot over to that wide receiver that we're more excited about for the playoff stretch in particular. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock. I hooked you up with both that free start sit question as well as that free trade question. So if there's anything else that you want to send my way, don't hesitate to. I'd be super happy to check it out for you. Now, moving over to our next question. This is coming out from Core Ops. Out here again, a long-time member of the flock. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question as well. And again, if there is anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to let me know. And also, this does appear to be an ESPN team. So I will say you should be able to link this with the site relatively easily, my friend. If you're having any issues linking your ESPN team with the site, just please send it in the site issues section of the Discord. You can find that link in the live chat in the description. Not the live chat, just the description. But yeah, if you can send that over to the site issues section, one of the developers would be happy to go ahead and help you link your team. But anyway, here at quarterback, we are rolling with Jalen Hurts, which is a really nice thing to see, just given the fact that this is a league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So because you only start 2 receivers and 1 flex, you're in a situation in which quarterback's going to make up a higher percentage of your starting lineup output than it otherwise would. Going over to what we have down with the bench, we have Baker Mayfield's. To be honest with you, I don't necessarily think Baker is a quarterback that you absolutely have to roster rest of season. I mean, if you are currently sitting here with Jalen Hurts already through his bye week, I wouldn't fault you at all if you decided to go through and if you decided to maybe move on from Hurts. I'm sorry, maybe move on from Baker if there's an option on the waiver wire that you're excited about. Obviously, if you could go through and if you could potentially sell Baker for something, I 100% would if possible. Going over to running back, we have Achane Jacobs. Very solid RB1, RB2 combo, which is an extremely important thing to look at, specifically in a league with these settings. Going down to the bench, we have Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne. So, I mean, Swift gives you plenty of running back depth, and that this is a running back that's pretty much every single week, at minimum, getting 20 opportunities. So, running back, we're in a really comfortable position. Going over to wide receiver, we have two elite names. I mean, two wide receiver ones at the minimum. We have Lamb, we have Kupp. We have Devonta Smith as an incredibly strong flex. Going down to the bench, we have Jalen Waddle as additional depth. Going over to tight end, we have the best tight end in fantasy football. He was before the Brandon Ayuk injury, especially after the Ayuk injury. You can say he's even better now. We have George Kittle. We're playing Hunter Henry this week. I would say this week, if Drake May does miss, I wouldn't be super excited about Hunter Henry as a streaming option. Like, looking at sportsbooks right now, they are currently projecting out this to be the worst offense in the NFL this week. Realistically speaking, trying to come up with what you could possibly do with this roster is extremely difficult, right? We have a very strong RB1, RB2 combo. It's a two wide receiver, one flex league where we're supposed to be optimizing for an elite QB and an elite tight ends. We have just that with Jalen Hurts and George Kittle. We have two wide receiver ones. We have plenty of depth throughout as well. Can y'all please let me know in the live chat, if you had this team, is there anything that you could potentially do realistically? I mean, if you could go and quote unquote overpay for another elite RB1 and go get Bijan Robinson by sending away Josh Jacobs and Jalen Waddle, let's do it in a heartbeat. But obviously, it's just much easier said than done to go get that top 5 asset. Really, that's the only thing that this team could look to do, is go out there and pay up for that top 5 asset for moving on from one of these guys that are exciting starts, but maybe don't have the same range of outcomes as like a Bijan Robinson does. And yeah, that's what Dylan says. Well, get a better RB2 or the flex. Upgrade Jacobs, honestly. Yeah, that's exactly where my head's at. Join a more competitive league. I mean, this is just a phenomenal team in general. But I think that's the only thing that you could presumably do. Like, in the flock league, I'd be freaking pumped if Jacobs was my RB2. But here, my team's not nearly as strong here at quarterback, at tight end, or receiver. So I think for yours, you can actually afford to go get that better running back too. But I really appreciate you and hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. In reality, I know I wasn't. You just have a nutso team. But I did hook you up with a free start sit question as well as a free trade question, just in case there's anything else that you wanted to send my way, my friend. But let's move this over to our next question. This is coming out from B Witness. I do want to remind y'all, of course, if you ever wanted to get in any questions on the site, you could always go ahead and send a question with the link in the live chat that says ask a question here. Or you can just go over to flockfantasy.com, where if you go to flockfantasy.com, we'll type that in Google real quick, and hit the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. There you can send in a team review, trade question, start sit question, or a super message, whatever you are wanting. If you wanted that free team review, I would highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have over there on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, we'll get a free CJ Stroud pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight. And you'll get a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. But this is a start sit question coming out from B Witness. Says, I'm debating who to start at my 2 flex positions. I think you go Rico Dowdle in an environment in which this should be an extremely high scoring game. And then I know everybody else will want to go Cedric Tillman. I don't think it's that easy, but especially if Njoku's not 100%, I think you can go with Tillman. I don't think it's an easy call here by any means, but I mean, if you are thinking through this, he's probably in a better offense than Wan'Dale. Tillman has the chance to be the wide receiver 1. Wan'Dale has no chance. Juju won't play. We don't want to play a tight end ever at the flex. The Bucky Irving is the worst matchup you could ever ask for going up against KC. Full BBR format, Chubb's not going to catch the ball. So it's really one of the Browns. It's Chubb or Tillman, whoever you want to go with between the two. Now our next question coming out from Jeremy says, not high on Higgins with his lingering injury. Are we starting both Jets tonight over the other options? So real quick, we go with Daniels over Burrow, especially with the Higgins injury. And yes, I think you have to go with both Wilson and Adams at wide receiver. You have no Higgins at practice today, so it looks that much more likely that he does miss. And then plan A will be Higgins and Reed. But obviously, if Higgins misses, we pivot to Dowdle. And honestly, I wouldn't pivot. I mean, if you have Malik Willis as the starter here in Green Bay, if you really wanted to pivot from, say, Reed to Tillman, I wouldn't fault you for it. But if Love plays, obviously you play Jaden Reed no matter what. But plan is Higgins. Hopefully Higgins is plan A there. And then our first backup option's Dowdle. Now, CJ coming out, this is London and Dell versus Breece and Neighbors. Well, Neighbors over Dell by a mile. Breece versus London, up to you. Probably give me Breece. So, yeah, this is the Breece and Neighbors side, and it's not even remotely close. 100% we're going to go Breece and Neighbors. Now, Tom coming out with a start-sit question. Says, deciding Tank, Zay, Hunt, or White in the last flex. So, Hunt is a little banged up here. I still plan on going ahead and taking Kareem Hunt. It's a great matchup with an extremely large spread against the Bucs, where we can assume that there's a good shot that KC can run the ball over and over and over again. It's not super easy, though. And the issue, of course, is Dell plays tonight, so we're not going to have all the clarity you need with Kareem Hunt by the time you need to make this decision. Now, our next question coming out from Alexandra. Here, wide receiver, we are going to go ahead and play Brian Thomas Jr. if he's good to go, but he's practiced each of the past 2 weeks. We're going to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. And then going down for the flex, I'd probably go Dowdle, to be honest. You have Lamar banged up. Lamar's missed practice over the past 2 weeks. Flowers going to have the worst matchup you could possibly ask for going up against Denver. Deontay Johnson not in the injury report, so it does look like Deontay's going to immediately play here. I can't do it. We're going to go Flowers, but it's damn close. Flowers, Dowdle are really the two guys that I'd be considering in the flex. If Deontay has been here for weeks and he had the time to expand his role, then maybe at that point, I would probably give Dowdle the edge, but I wouldn't expect a large role from Deontay right away. Now, Corona coming out. This is Gibbs versus Dobbins and Pollard. This is very easily Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, Pollard is having the opportunity, but it's been in a garbage offense. And if we end up getting Spears back in soon, then the targets may go down just a bit. Gibbs is in the best offense in the league, behind the best offensive line in the league, and Gibbs is by far and away the most talented running back in this deal. So I think you just go with the best asset here. Now, Dante Brown coming out says 7-1. I was told to pick who I want more between Zay and T. You definitely prefer T over Zay Flowers at this point. But looking at this, Breece versus the best asset in the other deal is Neighbors. Give me Breece. Dobbins versus Connor, up to you. Flowers versus Evans, give me Evans. I probably keep the best player in this deal, which is Breece Hall. I agree on a 7-1 roster. It probably does make sense to go and try to buy low on Mike Evans. The issue is, with that being said, I don't know if we're really getting a discount at that cost. Now, D. Nickel trading Bucky for Chubb. Give me Chubb. And Tillman versus Addison. It's kind of a wash here. I'd maybe prefer the former Biletnikoff round 1 NFL draft pick in the better offense, but it's not a super easy call. Yeah, I'd probably go ahead and I'd probably take the Nick Chubb and Addison side, but I don't think it's a very, very easy to view them as the winning pieces. Okay. Now going over to our next question. This one coming out from Matthew. This is one of those free Underdog team reviews. Appreciate you, my guy. Going to be excited to check this out. Says, what's up, Mason? I have so many trades this season, I can't keep track. I feel like I really need to solidify my RB2 position by packaging Brian Robinson and Pollard, but I'm afraid of losing my depth. Do you have any advice? Thanks. Thank you. So here, this is a league where depth does matter a bit. It is a 12-team double flex format. This is the exact format of the Flock League. And you are naming the team of Destiny. Who? There's one a team of Destiny. I'll tell you. That's yours truly. All right. So we may have to change the team name. Obviously. Just yanking a chain. But anyway, looking at this, we are the number 1 team in the league analyzer, and it's not even remotely close. Like, as we pull this up, I already know we're going to have a very difficult time coming up with that many suggestions. Now, the first thing is we have Lamar at quarterback. So obviously with Lamar, we can start him every single week, regardless of the matchup. Typically here, when we have Lamar at QB, you don't need another option, but you do have the week 14 bye. So I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to pick up like Tua, but that's in another month, right? The only thing to monitor is Lamar wasn't at practice today. Lamar wasn't at practice yesterday. So potentially Lamar misses, but right now, if you look at sportsbooks, there's still a massive spread on this game. It is still priced in that Lamar is going to be the guy. Now, going over to running back, we have the elite RB1 with Kyron Williams. RB2 behind this with Brian Robinson is very strong. Tony Pollard in this kind of format in particular, I do think makes a difference. If it was a 10-team league, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, then there, I don't care about Pollard. I don't think he's ever really going to move the needle one way or another. Here in this format where the depth does matter a bit, I actually think that Pollard would probably be a hold, even if he does have a cap ceiling based off the offense he's in. We have the premium handcuff back in Braylon Allen. Love to see it. Going over to what we have at wide receiver, we are sitting with 3 of the best receivers in fantasy with Lamb, Chase, and Tyreek. We have Devonta Smith that is an extremely strong wide receiver 4. This is a league in which you can start 4 wide receivers weekly. Beyond this, we have Rome Odunze and Demario Douglas. For me, I don't really see the path for a super high ceiling with Douglas. Given the offense he plays in, given the rotation that they're running out there at wide receiver, they're getting a ton of players' routes. So for me, I think I would probably prioritize rostering like a handcuff running back over to Mario Douglas. In most leagues, I would rather have Jalen Warren over him. I would rather have Ray Davis, Roschon Johnson, because there I could very easily see a path where, oh, okay, well, James Cook goes down. A Ray Davis could turn into a league winner. Whereas here, I don't necessarily see how that could ever happen with DeMario Douglas. But with that being said, it's a league in which you can start 4 wide receivers weekly, so the depth does matter a bit more. Going over to tight end, we're rolling with Hawkinson as well as Andrews, so we have some upside at tight end. I think you've already done an incredible job with this team. It's a league where the depth does matter. We have sold a lot of it to go and get the absolute studs in the lineup at the very top. However, with that being said, I mean, we've held on to just enough of that depth here. I don't know what we could presumably say with this team. If it was a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, I'd for sure want to be going through it. I'd for sure want to be trying to consolidate and maybe upgrade over the depth with somebody like Pollard, as you mentioned previously. But with this league where the depth does matter actually a little bit more, in my mind, I think you're in a much better spot to just kind of sit still. And I don't particularly know if we want to be making any pivots here, to be honest. But I really do appreciate you. I wish I would have been able to help you out in some way. But you look at the league analyzer, we are so far ahead of the rest of the league. This is a 12-team league where you freaking have Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and Kyron Williams, and Lamar Jackson. So, realistically speaking, I think you've already done everything you'd possibly need to. I think you're just rolling into the season as is. But I really appreciate you and really wish that I could have helped you out in some way here. Now, moving this over to our next question. This is another free team review coming out from Atello. Says, hey, Mason, I'm currently 4-4. Not sure if I should trade Walker Reed for a lesser ranked running back, but better receiver, or if we should just stick with our guns. Any help would be greatly appreciated. Really appreciate you, my guy. It's a 10-team league, so wide receiver depth shouldn't matter much. We should have great options on the waiver wire, but you can't start up to 4 receivers weekly. The question here is, you 8 yet? Interesting. But anyway, here at quarterback, we are rolling with Lamar. Obviously, when we have Lamar, you don't need a roster 2 quarterbacks. But Lamar is missing practice, so I don't fault you for doing so right now. Obviously, Lamar's not through the bye week either, so maybe at the very minimum you could say that we're going through and we're playing Caleb in week 14. But we're elite at quarterback. Nothing to do there. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with 2 top 10 RBs rest of season. Like, we have both Derrick Henry and Kenneth Walker. Going down to what we have specifically with our RB3 and Jonathan Brooks, he maybe saves our butt in that, obviously, before this, the depth did look very much shaky at the running back position, even if we had the top end production. Beyond that, it'd be hard to be super confident. But now that you have, I guess, Raheem Mostert potentially as a viable option, and Jonathan Brooks giving you some upside here as well. Very comfortable running back room. Going over to wide receiver, you can start 4 of these guys weekly. We are sitting with Kupp, Olave, Harrison, Reed. We even have Tank Dell. I would start Dell this week. Just with the possibility that we end up getting no Jordan Love, and then all of a sudden Dell was a much better option than Jaden Reed. We have the extremely solid tight end here with Evan Ingram. So this is a great team. I mean, I feel like every team that we have seen this live stream, maybe I'm just completely off my game, but you've already put yourself in a phenomenal spot. I mean, I can have some little small nitpicky things where I personally would probably rather have Jordan Addison over Cedric Tillman, but that's just me. And I wouldn't fault you at all for preferring Tillman, especially as you get Hawkinson back in. Honestly, if it was a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, I think you'd be highly incentivized to go ahead and try to sell somebody like Tank Dell. Maybe with Jonathan Brooks to go get an upgrade there at running back. But in a league in which you can start 4 receivers weekly, that's not inherently something that we are needing to do here. So honestly, I think we kind of keep this team as is outside of the Tillman to Addison pivot, which is what I would do, and I wouldn't fault you if you didn't want to. If you had a better record, I think you could justify going through and trying to sell like Cup and a small piece to go get Nico Collins. But we're 4-4, so we can't pivot over and only think about the fantasy football playoffs. We do have to be thinking about what we have in the short term here as well. But yeah, we are the second team in the league analyzer here. I think you're chilling with this roster as is, hoping that you have Lamar staying healthy. Because obviously Lamar goes down, it significantly hurts the roster, both with Lamar as well as with Henry. But I really do appreciate you and really wish I would have been able to help you out a little bit more. But I think you've already done a phenomenal job with this team, to be completely honest. Now, going over to our next question. This is coming out from Phoenix Lance. It's a half PPR, 0.2 point per carry league. 6 point per passing touchdown. We're going to go Goff over Stroud relatively easily with all the injuries that you have in Houston at the moment and the tough matchup. We're going to be going with Dell over Darnell Mooney and Jalen Waddle. And they're in the flex spots. I think you can leave this as is. I definitely play Tucker Kraft at tight ends. The only pivot is if Hunt's not good to go, you can pivot over to Waddle. Now, Todd coming out with our next question. They say start sit. We're here at wide receiver. We are going to go ahead. We don't have Pickens. So I guess we're starting Hopkins, Wandale, and Addison. And then tight end, we're going to go ahead and we will start Laporta over Ferg. And I don't know if maybe you only needed 2 wide receivers. If you only needed 2 receivers, I'd take out Wandale. But, I mean, I'm honestly maybe just biased here. I really hope Addison has a strong performance soon. But to be honest with you, I mean, Addison has been horrendous. Addison's legitimately had 1 game this season. And I mean 1 game this year with 5 or more targets. Now, just for Checo coming out with our next question. This is Jacob, St. Brown, Laporta versus Bijan, Dell, and Wilson. St. Brown to Bijan, lateral move up to you. Jacobs to Wilson, downgrade. Laporta to Dell, slight upgrade. You have St. Brown, Laporta, both through their bye weeks. Bijan, Dell, Wilson, none of them are through their own. For me, I probably keep the St. Brown side and hope that maybe we get a little more passing volume in Detroit. Obviously, I mean, this Lions offense has been the best offense in the league, but at the same time, it's not like St. Brown's been phenomenal in fantasy just because you're in a spot which the Lions really haven't had to throw the ball just because they've been too good in a way. Now, Matty Rich coming out with our next question. So, send away Reed, Dobbs, and Tracy for Malik. Yeah, this is Malik Neighbors, and it's not even remotely close. Well, I didn't really draft much Neighbors this year because he's going round 2 in underdog drafts and it was a bad offense. I can admit, Neighbors is currently leading the NFL in targets per game. He is still a locked and loaded wide receiver 1 rest of season, and I can say that with very little hesitation. I'm easily going Neighbors here. Now, next question coming out from Red Zone Riz says, could pick up Flacco, Young, or May on the waiver wire. Thank you. Thank you. I am for sure going to go with Jared Goff here. Not even close. Running back, we're going to go with Kamara as well as J.K. Dobbins. Wide receiver, we auto start Kupp and DJ Moore, but it's close between Moore, Mooney, and Downs. We're going to go with Kraft over Disley. And then down in the flex spot, we probably end up going with Darnell Mooney, Zay Flowers, and Josh Downs are very close. Not expecting to see a massive roll with Deontay Johnson immediately. I would still probably go Mooney in what's supposed to be the highest scoring game in the NFL this week. It's tough. Downs, you have a tougher matchup going up against the Vikings. Even though the Vikings actually have allowed a decent amount of points to opposing wide receivers so far this season. I don't think it's easy by any means. Now, Spencer coming out with our next free team review says, thanks for the great videos. Been watching almost all videos over the last few years. Thank you so much, my guy. I was wondering what you think of the team and if there are any changes you'd look to make for the week. Appreciate you. Here, the team is the second team in the league analyzer. Looks like it's a league where people know what they're doing, where teams are relatively even here. We are currently sitting at 5-3. It is a 12-team format, so the options on the waiver wire shouldn't be great. Now, at the same time, it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. So in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format, wide receiver depth's not going to matter, so we are still maybe incentivized to go out there and make 2-for-1 deals where we can. Quarterback, we have Jalen Hurts. Obviously, we're able to start him every single week, regardless of the matchup. He's already through the bye week as well, so very comfortable QB room. Going over to running back, we have James Cook, Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, Kareem Hunt, and Jordan Mason. So looking at running back, long term, I am concerned about this RB room. I think this is what we need to address. Is obviously, it's been great so far this season where Kareem Hunt steps in as the starter in KC. Jordan Mason steps in as the starter in San Fran. But the thing is, if you end up getting, say, McCaffrey back after the bye week, if Pacheco comes back after the season, sorry, not after the season, Pacheco comes back later in the season, closer to the fantasy football playoffs, and neither Hunt or Jordan Mason are viable anymore, you may be put in a really awkward spot. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league where we have St. Brown, Olave, 2 guys we can start every single week with confidence, Pickens, Downs, Worthy, guys that we can consider back and forth in that flex. For me, now that Josh Downs is a viable play, since you have no AR and Downs, you can actually look to get in at this point. I think what I would presumably do is see if you could get some value out of Pickens. I mean, obviously, we had Pickens as the sell high candidate a few weeks back. But still, I think going from Pickens to downs in the flex isn't really going to negatively impact you. Wide receiver depth's not the most important thing here. I think if you could pivot from Pickens and Najee to go get an RB upgrade, Pickens and Ramadre to go get an RB upgrade, personally, that's what I would be looking to do. In terms of any other running back or wide receiver pivots you can make, for me, in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, I don't really see how Demario Douglas is ever hitting your lineup here. I don't think you need to cut Douglas for Ray Davis. It would be something that I would consider, though, just because Ray Davis is very clearly an injury away from being a must-start name. Where I don't know if you can say the same thing with Douglas. But I think the main thing that you were wanting to do is try to sell Pickens and a running back depth piece, whether that's Najee or Ramadre, and go get that RB upgrade to try to prepare for what we have with the lack of production from Jordan Mason and Kareem Hunt down the stretch. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help out in some way here. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock, and thank you for taking advantage of that free Underdog team review. Now, G Monitor is coming out with our next question. Our next team. This said 10-team super flex league. Should we be looking to upgrade wide receiver, let it ride? Thanks for the team review. No, thank you. So 10-team super flex league. We do not have super flex redraft rankings on the site. We only have super flex dynasty rankings. So honestly, when you're looking at the league analyzer and the power standings, here you can just completely throw it away and completely ignore it. But this is Rip Chad the Rooster. And here, quarterback, we are sitting with 3 startable guys. Not only do we have 3 startable players, but we also have the best asset in any super flex league, which is going to be Lamar. Tua, I don't act like the strongest QB1 in the world, but still at the same time, I mean, Tua is a potential viable option. Going over to what we have at running back, we are sitting with 3 RB1s with Kamara, Breece, Achane. We even have James Conner, Tyrone Tracy. So in my mind, I think this is a very clear spot in which it does make a lot of sense to go sell one of these running backs with a wide receiver for a long-term wide receiver upgrade. Now, of course, when we're sitting at 6-2, we are not necessarily wanting to optimize for the production right this second. And instead, you are actually incentivized to look for the long-term upside if possible. So what I would be looking at personally is, I think if you could potentially look to swing off, say, Tyrone Tracy in a 2-for-1 deal with Tank Dell, in my mind, I think that would be the most exciting thing here. Because realistically, if we think through this, there's no world in which Tyrone Tracy is ever hitting your starting lineup when we have Kamara, Breece, Achane, and James Conner is the best fantasy football playoff schedule of any running back in the NFL. So I don't see how Tracy actually gets in your lineup. If we go long-term with this, with Dell, you're going to get Nico Collins back in on a team that's this strong. I don't know how he makes a real impact. So I definitely think plan A here is selling Tracy and Dell to go get the best wide receiver we possibly can. Maybe go pivot over to somebody like Mike Evans that will give you that elite ceiling for the fantasy football playoffs in particular. Another option of what you could look to do here is if you thought that we could maybe pivot off and upgrade over Cade Otton for the long term, that would be something. I think Cade Otton's a mid tight end 1 right now with no Evans in this offense. I think is phenomenal. But the thing is, if Evans does come back in later on, then at that point, do you have to potentially be concerned about K. Dotton no longer being a mid tight end one and falling to a low end tight end one. So if you really like Tank Dell, the upside that you get from Keon Coleman, the other move that you could potentially look to make is go through and sell K. Dotton and Tyrone Tracy for the best tight end you can get there. And then in terms of any waiver wire pivots to make, I don't necessarily see any. But this is a phenomenal team. We're clearly 6-2 for a reason. I think going out there and making that trade and trying to get one of the elites wide receivers by selling one of our wide running back depth pieces would be advantageous, even if we have to target one of the injured guys and get them at a discount like Evans or Nico. So for me personally, that is what I am looking to do. But I really appreciate you and hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Again, congrats on the phenomenal team in a super flex league. Obviously, you are in a very, very comfortable position. Now let's move this over to our next question. This was coming out from JRB. It says, please let me know who to start. I'm lost. Thank you. Thank you. So here at the flex, we are going to go ahead and we are going to be jamming in Chris Olave in a phenomenal matchup, and we'll probably play it safe with Terry McLaurin. If it was a non-PPR format, I definitely think you could go with Brian Robinson. But obviously with McLaurin, you're getting the additional receiving usage as well, which just makes it super easy. Okay. Now going over to our next question, that's coming out from Mother Flocka. This is a start set. We're here at running back. We're looking at Brooks, Swift, Moss, Bigsby. Swift, great matchup. You're a lock for 20 opportunities any given week. K. Dotton's very easy over Laporta, even in a tough matchup, given the fact that you just have so much target volume here with no Evans, with no Godwin. And then going down to the flex, this is Pollard, Moss, Bigsby, Ladd, Downs, Flowers, Dell, and Laporta. I think we more likely than not, we are going to take Tank Dell here, but keep in mind, since Dell plays tonight, you go ahead and you put him in at wide receiver 2, and you move London down to the flex, just in case anything happens here. Now, LeGabriel coming out with our next question. We're trading Swift for Olave. It's a league at running back where we have Connor, Jahmyr Gibbs, and that's it. And at wide receiver, we have Garrett Wilson, Cooper Kupp, Jaden Reed, Jordan Addison, Calvin Ridley. So if you make this deal, you're only rostering 2 running backs. And this is a 10-team league in which you only start 2 receivers in a flex. So for the vast majority of people here, I would recommend that you go ahead and you take Chris Olave. I think Olave is going to be absolutely crushing when you're at a spot in which I don't know. You have no Shaheed. You have Carr coming back in. I think Olave is a phenomenal buy low candidate. Just in a 10-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format, you specifically don't need Olave here. So I think that is a tough spot to be in. Okay, let's go ahead and let's mark that as complete. Let's refresh this. Now, PPAP coming out with our next question says, hey, we're 5-3. Wide receivers, we have Lamb, Dell, Higgins, Shakir, McMillan, Tillman. Is this fair / worth it? Might send it. So if we think through this, I actually think that this is a very sneaky move where a 5-3 roster, it does make a lot of sense to make. Where with Jordan Love possibly missing this week, if that does happen, Jaden Reed's not startable this week. Jaden Reed has the bye week in week 10. So presumably, obviously, Evans is going to miss this week. Evans, we assume, misses next, and then the bye week in week 11. But effectively, you only have one extra game from Jaden Reed in comparison to Mike Evans. While at the same time, I don't know. You have no Godwin rest of season, so Evans should be a lock for 10 plus targets a game in an offense with great quarterback play. Whereas with Reed, you are getting so many targets to Spurs. So I actually think going with Evans is a very clear play here. Now, Easy E coming out says, we lost Rashid and Shaheed. 5-2. Would this trade make sense if we need wide receiver depth, but I have 2 Lions running backs? I'm not concerned about that, to be honest. Taylor to Puka, lateral move, up to you in my mind. I would probably rather have Taylor. And honestly, we probably need to reflect that in our rest of season ranks now that you have no AR. I think you can move up Jonathan Taylor just because you're going to have more checkdowns and a lessened threat of goal line vultures. So we're going to move JT up ahead of Puka here. Actually, probably move Achan ahead of him as well. But anyway, so I think going from JT to Puka is a clear downgrade. Brian Thomas Jr. to Montgomery depends on the Thomas injury. Laporta to Hawkinson is a downgrade. You're getting Hopkins for your troubles. I don't necessarily know if Hopkins really moves the needle with how big these assets are, but it is a 12-team league where you can start 4 receivers weekly. So with that in mind, I guess Hopkins could be a weekly starter for us. I have no idea here, to be honest. Can y'all spam the chat? What side would y'all rather have? Would y'all rather have Taylor, Brian Thomas Jr., or Sam Laporta? I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. Would you rather have Taylor, Brian Thomas Jr., Sam Laporta, or David Montgomery, Puka Nacua, DeAndre Hopkins, and TJ Hawkinson? We got 1 vote on the Puka side. Another vote on the Puka side. JT side, Puka. So it looks like the vast majority of people are on the Puka Nacua side. Again, I do want to reiterate, I do think JT is the best player in the deal. I don't think it's, that big of a gap, though, between JT and Puka. We have them ranked next to each other rest of season. But yeah, specifically in a league environment in which you can start 4 receivers weekly, it is a 12-team format. You can make that argument that Hopkins does move the needle and that he is an every week starter for us in this league. Now, Go Utes Tommy, always happy to see it, says, offered Waddle, he countered with Adams. Should we still do it? Taylor to Kyron upgrade. London to Debo downgrade. Adams to Dobbins. Up to you. If you are a long-term play, honestly, even in a short-term play, because you're going to get the same amount of games played from Debo as you will with these other options. Yeah, I think you probably go ahead. I think you probably take the Kyron, Dobbins, and Debo side. We're going to go Kyron, Dobbins, Debo. Now, Jawut Hoodie says, hey, Mason, is this trade worth it? I have Saquon and Henry. If we have Saquon and Henry, we definitely want the Alvin Kamara side. At that point, we don't really care about the depth play. I think we just go for the best option and get inside your starting lineup. And I personally view Kamara as the top 5 running back rest of season in a full PPR format. So I would say it's like an easy spot to go with Kamara, but I think be confident with it. Now, J-Mo coming out with our next start set says this is a PPR league. Quarterback, dear God. I'd probably go Bo Nix, but no, I can't. I go with Stroud. I think Bo Nix, you are going to see some pretty serious regression here if you're looking at what you have specifically from sports books at the moment. They are projecting out the Broncos to be a bottom 5 offense in the league this week. Going over to what we have at wide receiver, I think you need to go through, you need to play London. Where if we are looking at Drake London, this should be the highest scoring game in the entire league. Or at least that's how it projects currently in London. Obviously, we've seen the large share of targets throughout the entire season now. And going for the flex, I hate to say this, the vast majority of weeks, we are going to go ahead and we are going to be playing Cooper Kupp. But specifically this week, I think you go ahead and instead go with Olave. Just given the fact that we should have the much better matchup against the Carolina Panthers. Now, Connor coming out with our next question. Says 8-0 start so far. Any advice is much appreciated. So let's go ahead and let's look at this. This is a phenomenal team. Obviously, I mean, we've been saying that on these teams where you have the winning record, it makes sense to go ahead and move off of Chuba if possible. If you still can, I probably would, but much easier said than done now. For the flex, if Jordan Love plays, we're going to go with Jaden Reed. If Jordan Love misses, we're going to go Chase Brown. But Jordan Love did get in the limited practice today. So there is that chance that Love plays. We're just going to obviously have to monitor what we have with the reports coming out of Green Bay over the next few weeks. Now, Run CMC coming out with a team review. Really appreciate you. Going to be excited to check this out, my guy. This is a dynasty team. Says we're 7-1, looking to go for the championship this year. Looking at the league analyzer, we're just by far and away better than everybody else here. What moves do we need to make to improve the ads this year? Well, I really appreciate you. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start set question, just in case you have any follow-ups with this that you want to send my way. But anyway, looking at this team, we are by far and away the best team in the league according to this league analyzer. It is a 10-team league in which you can only start up to 4 receivers weekly. So actually, no, maybe this is a keeper league. I don't know if this is a keeper league. I don't know if this is a dynasty league. Regardless, we are in a very comfortable spot. If you could let me know in the live chat, if you are here, Run CMC, if this is a keeper or dynasty league, that'd be great. But I mean, realistically speaking, I don't know what we could do with the team regardless. Because as you look at this, quarterback, we have May, Herbert, Stafford. So I guess the one spot that you could go ahead and try to improve is the quarterback position. But yeah, this is the thing. 3 top 6 picks, question mark. I mean, this is a nutso team. So obviously when we're looking at wide receiver, this is where if we were selling anything, we were looking to pivot. Now, of course, it's a league in which you can start 4 wide receivers weekly. So you're not having to go through and look to sell Chase, Neighbors, St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr. These are guys that are going to absolutely crush this season while at the same time giving you long-term value. I think it's an easy spot, though, to say, well, you know what? The depth beyond this isn't super important for us. So if you can go ahead and move on from somebody like Devonta Smith, who looks like an extremely strong wide receiver too at the moment, but even with that being said, he's probably not startable for us, and go get a top-end quarterback, that'd be an absolute no-brainer. Like if you could send Matthew Stafford with Devonta Smith, or send Drake May with Devonta Smith. and maybe go get to a top 4 name, whether that's Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels. It'd be a no-brainer. Obviously, much easier said than done. Another move that you could look to make as well is if you wanted to pivot over from Devonta Smith and go get some help at running back with the expectation that possibly you do have Pacheco coming back in rest of season. And then, I don't know, maybe Kareem Hunt's no longer viable, so we just don't have a ton of depth here. That could also be something that you look at doing. But we have Breece and we have Montgomery as well. So let's go ahead and let's see if we can find a team that potentially, like this team has Daniels, right? And dear God, that is not looking good. But I mean, this team has Daniels. They don't need a wide receiver, which is the issue. So I don't know if there's any shot we could go ahead and trade for it. Maybe you can get Kyler with a really cheap cost. The thing is, I just don't see what deal would make sense there. This team has Lamar. Right now, they had the Godwin injury. They had the Ayuk injury. They're 5-3. They have Lazard, Ayuk, Godwin all on the IR. So, I mean, if you could somehow go through and send our quarterback room with Devonta Smith to get to Lamar Jackson, it's an absolute no-brainer. If you wanted to try to send Smith to go get to that depth running back like Brian Robinson Jr., with this team having McCaffrey coming back in, I think you could look to do that as well. But we just have a phenomenal team here. We have the elite tight end with McBride as well. Really, the only thing that this comes down to is trying to sell Devonta Smith and get the best quarterback that we can. That's the only thing that matters. And if our league mate's saying, F you, you have the best team in the league by far, and they're not going to give us a quarterback, then we can go ahead and we can look at an RB. But if you have any exact trades with this that you want me to look at, like I said, I did hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question. So please feel free to send that my way. I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you. But thank you again. I really appreciate you. Really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. And yeah, thank you so much for everything. Now let's move this over to our next question coming out from BRB. Here, running back Montgomery must start name every single week, even in a tough matchup. Tight end, we're going to go with K. Dotton. K. Dotton must start tight end any week until Evans comes back in. Even in a tough matchup. And then going down to the flex, for me, it either comes down to Chase Brown, Tank Dell. I think what I'd actually probably do is play Tank Dell over Wan'Dale Robinson. And then in the flex spot, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get Chase Brown in. So bench Wan'Dale, play Dell, play Chase, just because obviously we want the players in the better offenses. Now, Bank, always happy to see us, says, not sure about this trade. I feel Hopkins is more upside, but it helps me in a package with Chase Brown. Okay, let me look at this. Running back, we have Achane, James Conner, Chase Brown that we can start every week. Wide receiver, we have St. Brown, Cup, and that's about it. So I guess we can go ahead, and if you wanted to go with the wide receiver depth of Hopkins, I'm not going to fault you for it. Again, this is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, so the wide receiver depth's not going to be super important here. Can y'all please spam the chat? Who would y'all rather have rest of season? Would y'all rather have Etienne or Hopkins? Are you going Etienne or Hopkins rest of season? Looks like the majority of people are going Hopkins. Here, with the running back room that you have in comparison to wide receivers, I definitely think you can look to do that. But let's move this over to our next question. This was coming out from Jay Hacks. Says, just made this trade, 7th trade, 6-2 team. Mixon to Breece, slight downgrade in my mind. Neither player through the bye. Either Ladd McConkey, 2T Higgins, clear upgrade rest of season. Sam Laporta, 2 TJ Hawkinson. I'd probably rather have Laporta. 6-2 team. I think I could see the argument to go ahead and get the upside that you have with Higgins rest of season. But my thought process is Mixon's the best player in the deal. I don't know if Hawkinson's guaranteed to be a true difference-making tight end. I think he's probably finding himself in the same range as what you're going to have with Laporta rest of season anyway. Now going over to our next question. This was coming out from Judai. Here, running back. We are choosing between the Jags and Bucky Irving. If ETN were to miss, we go Tank Bigsby. If ETN plays, you go Bucky. Bucky just has a tough matchup. And then going down to the flex spots, we're for sure jamming in the receivers. We're going to go Waddle and Harrison. Waddle's been horrendous, though, and the projections on this Dolphins team are very bad against the Bills as well, which is something to keep in mind. Now, Jay Dollar-Sign coming out with a start-sit question. Here, wide receiver, we are looking at Reed, Higgins, Brian Thomas, and Cedric Tillman. So plan A is Brian Thomas Jr. if he plays. Plan B is Jaden Reed if Jordan Love plays. Plan C is T. Higgins if he plays. Plan D is Cedric Tillman. But again, plan A is Brian Thomas Jr. It's almost impossible to know right now, however, just because obviously you're in a spot in which we initially thought Brian Thomas Jr. was for sure missing this week. But he did end up getting in a limited practice both today and yesterday. Next question coming out from Jay Rodriguez says 2 and 5. What can we get for Flowers, Deontay, Shakir, and Tracy? Let's go ahead and let's look at the trade finder and see what you can have for Tracy. Let me submit these. Trade finder. Tracy. What has Tracy been dealt for? Tracy, Singletary, Shakir has been dealt for Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker by a mile with your team. Tracy versus Bo Nix, Jordan Mason. Give me Tracy. This side, give me Tracy. I wouldn't sell Tracy for this. Wouldn't sell Tracy for that. Wouldn't sell Tracy for that. Wouldn't sell Tracy for that. Tracy and Njoku for Ladd, Dobbins, and Ferg. I think pivoting from Tracy to a running back like Dobbins makes a lot of sense. If you consider the fact that obviously, one, Tracy is a risk to miss this week. And two, on top of that, if you are looking at Tyrone Tracy, this is a player that's not through the bye week either, where you have the bye week in week 11. Whereas if you're looking at Dobbins, Dobbins is fully healthy, while at the same time, Dobbins is through his bye as well. So I think that's what we'd be looking to pivot to. Now, in Drew B, coming out with our next question. Massive dono here. Let me hook you up with a free start-sit question. That way, next time you send one in, it doesn't cost anything. Says, need a wide receiver and a flex help. Should we start Dell tonight or wait on Higgins' injury update and start Flowers? Flex Robinson or Pollard? You have to start Tank Dell. It looks like Higgins probably is going to be missing. I mean, T. Higgins did miss practice today. Going down to the flex, I think plan A is Brian Robinson Jr. I mean, Pollard missed practice. Pollard's in a worse offense. And Pollard's been at least a less efficient running back as well. Now, our next question going out from It's Chavez. So should we start Dell or Reed? Love the vids. Really appreciate you. For me, I would just play it safe and I would go Tank Dell. If we knew that Dell was good to go, Love was good to go, I would go with Jaden Reed over him. I just don't want to take that risk where it is just extremely difficult to project that out. Where, I mean, we kind of saw this earlier in the year as well when Jordan Love was missing games. They would continue to act like Love had a chance to play. That way opposing defenses didn't really know exactly what to scheme for. Now, Muncher Man coming out says, my running backs are Chuba and Rico, and I'm stacked at receiver with Lamb and Nico Collins. Garrett Wilson to Brian Thomas. Give me Brian Thomas. David Njoku and Chuba Hubbard to James Conner. Give me James Conner because effectively Chuba's a zero for me at this point. So, yeah, we will go ahead and we'll make this deal for James Conner, but a big reason for this is I don't see Garrett Wilson or Brian Thomas Jr. being some big downgrade with what we've had from Thomas so far this season. And obviously, as well, I don't know, Garrett Wilson being arguably the wide receiver 2 in a horrible offense, or wide receiver 1A, regardless of what you call it. But yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. is going to dominate targets with no Kirk going in the future. Now, comeback season coming out with our next question says, who should we play if DK's out? Worried about the matchup with Waddle. If Lamar didn't participate, then Nix, Kirk, or Stafford. I would go with Cousins if we had to pivot to somebody, but you still playing on Lamar. We go with Dobbins relatively easily here at running back. I agree with you. I don't love the spot for Waddle against the Bills. If Metcalf plays, Metcalf's plan A. Waddle's probably the second option. And then if Metcalf were to miss, then at that point, I think we pivot to either Stevenson or Dowdle. We're to finalize the flex rankings and get them out tomorrow there at running back for you, though. But it is a little bit of an awkward spot, of course, with Waddle, where right now you actually do have, I want to say, the Bills as 8.5-point favorites, where sportsbooks are currently projecting out the Dolphins to be a very bad offense this week. Now, David coming out with our next question. It says, start set. Well, here at the flex, we are going to go ahead and we are going to be, oh, dear God, we have a lot of players out this week. We have no Pacheco. We have no Mason. I think you end up planning on Hopkins, Tracy, Madison. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cedric Tillman would be our pivot options. Worthy would be a pivot option. But, I mean, with the running backs, you have the guaranteed workload. Obviously, we don't know if Tracy is going to be playing this week, but you did get a limited practice in today, which is really good news if you were wanting to start Tracy. So I think we're probably going with these options. And if Tracy misses, then you could pivot to Worthy or Tillman. For me, I would prefer Worthy and a phenomenal matchup. Okay. Now, Walkman coming out with our next question says, don't know who to put in the flex spots. Well, tight end, we're going to go with Ferg. For the flexes, we're going to go with Chase Brown and, dear God, I still go Waddle over Downs. It is getting, actually, no, never mind. We have Tank Dell. I apologize. So we actually are going to start Tank Dell just because he plays on Thursday. You don't put him at the flex just in case something happens. Put him in at wide receiver 2. Just go ahead and move Puka Nacua down to the flex spot here. But yeah, really strong team where we're benching both Waddle and Josh Downs. Where obviously the Vikings have a lot of points to opposing wide receivers so far this season. Now, Bobby coming out with our next start set. Here, quarterback, we are going to go with Dak over Love, assuming Love misses. And even if Love plays, I would want to be a little bit hesitant to just go ahead and jam him in. And then here at our other wide receiver slot, for me, I probably go ahead and I play JSN. It's not really easy. Tight end, we're going to go with Komet. If Love doesn't play, we'll pivot to Kraft. We go Komet if Love doesn't play. You pivot to Kraft if Love does. And then down in the flexes, we are going to be going with a Bucky Irving and Jordan Addison. Sutton, you obviously have a good matchup. I know you had a strong performance last week, but last week you had the Broncos projected out as a top 5 scoring offense in the NFL. And this week they project out as a bottom 5 scoring team. Now, Butterball says, my whole fam went to UT. Hook'em Horns, brother. Hook'em Horns, my guy. Here we have to start, I'm assuming maybe only one tight end. If we're looking at this, I would go with Kincaid over Laporta, and a tough matchup for Laporta here. I'm going down to the flex. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take it safe with J.K. Dobbins, where Dobbins, you are getting 20 opportunities every single week, pretty much locked and loaded in a very good offense. Now, Johnny coming out with our next question says, can I please get my voucher? It's been 2 weeks. Can you shoot me an email, mason.dodd@flockfantasy.com? If you didn't get your voucher, what that most likely meant is you, 1, didn't make the $10 deposit on Underdog, or 2, you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address after we already granted the vouchers for that previous day. So please just shoot me an email, mason.dodd@flockfantasy.com. Let me know your email address on Underdog. Let me know your email address on flockfantasy.com so I can go ahead and confirm if we need to hook you up with a voucher, my guy. But let's move this over to our next question here. This next one coming out from Micro. This is a start set. Here, quarterback, we are going to go ahead and we are going to be getting in Kyler with the rushing upside. I think Stroud would be a horrible start this week. We're going to go McBride over Otten. Otten does have a tough matchup against the Chiefs. I will say in general, obviously, Cade Otton looks like a phenomenal option with no Evans and with no Godwin. And then down in the flex, we have no Diggs. We have no Godwin, so it does make things a little bit tougher. I probably go ahead and I take Chase Brown. It's a great matchup against the Raiders, of course. Chase Brown's consistently seeing the majority of the usage here, and we still project this out to be one of the better offenses in the league. Now, Johnny coming out says, I followed all the steps, and I'm not getting anywhere. We just said this. Like I said, please shoot me an email, mason.dodd@flockfantasy.com. Now, Apple coming out with our next question. This one is a start sit, wide receiver, Terry, locked and loaded guy every single week, regardless of matchup at this point. And we'd say the same thing about Achane. I mean, honestly, I would still bench Jaden Reed here, even if Jordan Love is good to go. I think it would just be very difficult to get him in over either one of these names. Okay. So moving this over to our next option. Unix says, who should we start? Should we start Devontae tonight or someone else? If we were to pivot to somebody else, it would more likely than not be Chase Brown, but I probably would go with Smith tonight. Now, because of course he plays tonight, we're going to go ahead and we're going to play him at wide receiver, not the flex. And you're going to move Terry McLaurin down to your flex spot just in case something happens later in the week. But yeah, I mean, I still think Adams, while he's been garbage over the past 2 weeks, more likely than not, you just have to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, knowing that while he has the chemistry with Rodgers, it can still take some time, and that, I mean, thinking about how long he went without playing with Aaron Rodgers. He has been in Las Vegas for years now. Now, next question coming out from Brian Walsh. Coming out with the free Underdog team review. Appreciate you going to be excited to check this out. And real quick, it looks like we don't have too many more questions to get through. So we're actually going to be able to get through these real quick. And if you wanted to get in a question for this live stream, you can always go and hit the link in the live chat that says ask a question here. Or you can go over to flockfantasy.com, hit the expert advice button in the top right corner. There you can send in a super message, start set question, trade question, or a team review, whatever you are wanting. I will say if you want that team review, of course, definitely what I would recommend doing is going over to Underdog Fantasy. And if you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free CJ Stroud pick, more than less than half a total yard for tonight's game. And you're going to be getting that free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single night. So just make sure you go ahead and go through that link in the description. And if you wanted that free team review, oh dear God, Puka knee injury. But if you wanted that free team review, just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog. But did Puka really just injure himself? Puka left practice early because of knee injury. Officially limited in practice on Thursday. Dear God. Puka with only like 57% of the snaps last week goes through and gives you a phenomenal performance. I may have to change the title of this live stream too. This freaking sucks. I don't think you can rely on Puka at this point. In terms of this week. Like, how many times have we seen this where on Thursday, on Friday this season, Puka ends up, I'm sorry, not even just Puka, a wide receiver ends up getting downgraded for whatever reason, whether it's the hamstring, whether it's like the quad like last week with T. Higgins. How many times does the player that gets downgraded at the end of the week actually come through and end up playing? It's been extremely rare. Extremely. This is a funny tweet. Oh my gosh. It was the same knee that was previously injured. What are, like, obviously, I don't want to sit here and like go through and immediately update our rest of season ranks and immediately move Puka Nacua down dramatically and move Cooper Kupp up dramatically. But we can probably update our weekly rankings at the very minimum. All right, let's go ahead and let's look at this. Rest of season, and I'll knock Puka just a bit. Like, rest of season at this point, there's no way you take Puka instead of Kupp. I'd rather Debo over Puka. I can say that with confidence. I'm not going to move Puka down much more than this just because, realistically speaking, I think it's very difficult to project out. Now, of course, if Puka does end up going on the IR for this, then we probably need to move Cooper Kupp. If Puka goes to the IR, Kupp goes ahead of Neighbors. He goes ahead of Nico. He goes ahead of St. Brown. He goes up here. Kupp's the top 5 wide receiver rest of season. Now, like I said, I'm not going to do that right now just because The only word that we have is he had to exit practice with the knee injury in the same knee that obviously he went on the IR with previously this year. It doesn't inherently guarantee that the man's guaranteed to go on the IR again, or he's guaranteed to miss a considerable amount of time. But I think it's enough for me to say, like, oh, if somebody offered you Cooper Kupp right now for Puka Nacua, who would you rather have? I see people going, oh, dropping him over a tweet is crazy. I'm sorry to break this news to you, my friend, but in fantasy football, typically how you get news is over tweets. That's typically how reporting is done in fantasy football. But yeah, it looks like we got Kupp. Yeah, it looks like everybody in the chat, I don't see anybody saying they'd rather have Puka over Kupp rest of season. And then for this week, like if you were sitting here, these are our week 9 rankings instead. Like, I think we have to move Puka down. Obviously, we need to be moving Higgins down dramatically as well. But just to try to figure out where we have these guys at the moment. DK misses practice too. Let's move the guys that are currently questionable dealing with injuries. Specifically behind like the Jets receivers tonight and Tank Dell. Because if I was sitting here with Tank Dell and I had to choose between like, oh, Tank Dell or Puka Nacua for this week, and I don't have a viable backup option, obviously you have somebody you could pivot to, then you can ignore it. But if you don't have a possible pivot, you probably just play the safe guy on a Thursday night. So I think we have to move him behind the Jets players. And we have to move him behind somebody like Tank Dell. So it sucks. Obviously, we are not sitting here with all the information at the moment. All we know is Puka Nacua left practice early because of the knee injury, officially limited in practice on Thursday. It was the same knee that was previously injured. Brady says couldn't even do his presser. RIP. Freaking sucks. I'm not going to make any dramatic conclusions from this, but I do want to say, like, if you have Devontae Adams and you're planning on starting Puka this week instead, you probably pivot over to Devontae Adams. You probably don't roll the dice. But let's move this over and start going through some more of these questions here. This is going to be one of those free team reviews. Thank you for taking advantage of that Underdog offer. Going to be excited to look at this. Started 4-0. We lost Rice, Nico, and Ayuk back-to-back weeks. Trying to climb back in and stay in contention. Now, that is just absolutely brutal. Now, good news is, of course, when you have Nico, that Nico should be back in next week, and he should be a top 5 wide receiver immediately with no Stephon Diggs. Now, this team's currently Witching Hour, I want to say is the team name. We are 5th in the league analyzer, so we are right in the middle of the pack. We are 9-7, so if y'all are wondering, oh, how you're 9-7, you play against the league median. It's a way to smooth out the variance. For me, where I've been kind of getting some lucky in some of my matchups this season, I would hate it if this was my league format, but obviously, if you have a very good team, this is what you want it to be. But we are sitting with Jalen Hurts, so we have the elite quarterback that we're able to start every single week, regardless of the matchup here, with confidence. Absolutely love to see it. Already through the bye week as well, so you don't need another QB. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with Jahmyr Gibbs as well as James Cook. 2 running backs that we can start every single week, regardless of the matchup. Obviously, we have Gibbs here as the RB1. James Cook is a very strong RB2. Rico Dowdle is a quality depth piece. Roschon as a running back that is an injury away from making a difference. it is a league in which you can start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So since you can start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex here, you can start up to 4 wide receivers. And since you can start up to 4 wide receivers, wide receiver depth does matter a bit more. In the long term, we're going to have Nico Collins in, so a locked and loaded wide receiver 1. We'll have Harrison, who's the wide receiver 2 at the moment, but obviously you have upside for more. And we have Josh Downs, DeAndre Hopkins. Looking at the options on the very bottom of the bench with Tillman, Sutton, and Dontavian Wicks, typically I would say that these are players that I'm looking to pivot off of if you're in a situation in which you only start 2 receivers in a flex. I'd rather roster a running back that's an injury away from making a significant difference. You have Spears out there on the waiver wire at the moment with Tony Pollard banged up. So what I would probably look to do is, if possible, I think it would be interesting to maybe pivot off of Dontavian Wicks, pick up Tajee Spears, because if you were to potentially have Spears coming back this week, which right now does not look like a guarantee, but a possibility. And if you were to have Spears coming back this week with no Tony Pollard, then at that point, Spears could be a lock for one of the flexes. And then going over to what we have at wide receiver, Parker Washington, Gabe Davis, you have the Jags guys. Obviously, a bunch of injuries in Jacksonville. I don't think you have to drop any of the wide receivers for these options. We have Zach Ertz to play this week. We have Dallas Goedert for the Jalen Hurts stack in the long term. So if this was a roster where you were currently, say, 7-9, or maybe you were 6-10, then at that point, I think that it probably makes sense for you to go ahead and for you to pivot off of maybe Nico Collins and go get some production in the short term rather than focusing in on long-term upside. However, specifically with you being in a situation instead where we are 9-7 and we can't afford to think about that long-term upside, I would rather just roll with Collins. I'd rather roll with Harrison. I think that you are in a very good situation as is. So the only real thing I think I could consider for this roster is maybe dropping Dontavian Wicks for Spears, to be honest. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. Again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that free Underdog team offer. And it's going to be a dramatically different situation when you get Nico Collins back in, of course. But thank you so much. And as always, if there's anything else I can do for you, don't hesitate to let me know. Would have been a monstrous team before the injuries. Now, Elijah coming out says, we use team quarterbacks. We have Stroud and Cousins. I definitely go with Cousins this week over Stroud. And also, for me, I really don't like team quarterbacks. Maybe in like best ball, I could see it making sense. But if you have a waiver wire, I don't know why we're doing that. Going over to tight end, K-Dot, just absolute must-start name. Going down to the flex. If Brian Thomas Jr. does play, obviously, he is the guy that we're going to go with. He did practice yesterday. He did practice today as well. So I'd go with Brian Thomas Jr. and as a backup option. If he doesn't play, I would pivot over to Josh Downs. But play Cousins there at quarterback. Prestige Worldwide coming out with a massive dono. Thank you, my guy. Let me hook you up with a free start-sit question. Next time you ask something my way, it should be free if it's a start-sit. Says, if the trade rumors are true about ETN, they might want to show him off, but don't know if the injury will be worse than the Carolina committee. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's check this out. Wide receiver, I think we will play Tillman over Sutton. Sutton has a good matchup, but sportsbooks are projecting out a significant regression for this Denver Broncos offense this week against Baltimore. Going over to what we have in the flex, we are looking at the Carolina backs, Travis Etienne, Courtland Sutton. Now, for me, if Etienne plays and Jonathan Brooks plays as well, I think we probably play Travis Etienne. Whereas if Jonathan Brooks does not play, then at that point, I think you're going to pivot over to Chuba Hubbard. I would expect ETN to be in a committee with Tank Bigsby, but I'd expect that Hubbard's in a committee with Brooks. And for me, I know it's not a great matchup, but I still would hope that you have more upside with the Jags offense than you're going to get in Carolina. Okay. Going over to our next question, coming out from our team, says 4-4. We have Etienne, Gibson, Wilson, Harrison, Tank, Waddle. So Taylor to Lamb, upgrade. Cup to Bucky, downgrade. Half PPR format, which does give a slight hit to what you are going to get with Lamb, a slight bump to what we should expect to have with Taylor. Still, now that we have the uncertainty around Puka Nacua and the knee injury, I think that you probably need to go ahead and you need to hold on to Cup until you have more information about Puka. Because if Puka were to miss time with this knee getting re-aggravated, then at that point, Cup is an absolute top 5 wide receiver. So, yeah, I don't know how you can get away from Taylor and Cup here. Now, Macho Man coming out with a start set. Here at quarterback, we are going to go ahead and Cousins Mahomes is really close. Both quarterbacks are kind of streaming options weekly. I would go Cousins over Mahomes this week. Right now, you have an over-under about 53.5 points for this Dallas Falcons game. So it should be an environment in which we do have a considerable amount of points scored in Atlanta. And going down to the flex, with that in mind, we are going to just double down on the game that should be extremely high scoring. We are going to take Dowdle. My expectation is still that Dowdle is the starting running back here in Dallas. While at the same time, I mean, we can acknowledge the fact that it's not like he's going to have some massive workload. I mean, it's Dalvin, Zeke didn't really do anything to inspire last week. Next question coming out from Griffin Foster. This is Pacheco, Cup versus Chase Brown and Adams. I think this would have been close if it honestly, it wouldn't have been close anyway. We're going to go with the best player. We are going to take Cooper Kupp, but especially now that you have the uncertainty around the Puka Nacua knee injury, I think it makes it just that much easier to go with the Kupp and Pacheco side, though I will admit, of course, that I do have no idea what to expect with Pacheco. Now, Bella Balls coming out says, made 4 total trades with 4 separate people and ended with this. Also, since my 2025 late first, did we win? Well, really appreciate you. Let me hook you up with a free trade question. That way, next time you send one out, it doesn't cost anything. So obviously, we are operating under the assumption that this is going to be a dynasty format. Going from Henry to Kamara, neither running back's a long-term piece. I would have maybe a little bit more hope for Kamara than Henry in 2025 based off the profiles of these running backs. But obviously this season you prefer Henry. But I would call Henry Kamara almost a wash. Going from Jonathan Brooks to Brian Robinson, I don't think there's a massive difference between these two guys in Dynasty. I mean, obviously, we'd prefer Brian Robinson in redraft. I'd probably prefer Brooks in Dynasty. Ertz has 0 value, likely almost 0 value. Definitely more value than Ertz in Dynasty, though. But, I mean, if we're getting McBride here as an additional asset on here, I definitely prefer the Trey McBride side of this. As McBride not only is that elite tight end cornerstone piece for us to build around this season, but it should be the case for years to come as well. Now, moving over to our next question, coming out from H132. This is Travis Etienne and Jahmyr Gibbs versus James Conner and Malik Neighbors. So Gibbs to Neighbors, slight downgrade. But going from Etienne to James Conner is just a massive upgrade, with Conner having the #1 playoff schedule of any running back in the NFL. And at the same time, Malik Neighbors is a great schedule for the fantasy football playoffs too. So I think you can take the combo of James Conner and Malik Neighbors. Now, Young Stowe coming out with our next question says, should I hold on to Downs with Flacco in? Thanks for all the help, as always. Really appreciate you. I obviously think Downs is incredibly exciting now that you have Joe Flacco back in here. But I'm still going to take Olave. Olave, you're getting Derek Carr back in New Orleans. Our priors on this was that Olave is the more talented player. I mean, you are looking at Olave as well as the option that has the draft capital attached, that has the large sample. And you have the Shaheed injury, which should expand the target share that you're going to get for Olave in New Orleans. So I think we go with Chris Olave here. Now, next question coming out from H132. It's a start set where our best option on the bench, we have Gibbs as well as Downs on the bench. So we for sure get these guys in. You play Josh Downs over Cedric Tillman. You play Jahmyr Gibbs over Ramondre Stevenson. And I would probably go Kyler over Love. I know it's not the best matchup here, but with Love banged up, Kyler does give you some rushing upside. Most weeks I'd rather have Love over Kyler. I just don't know how confident you can be to call Love in over Kyler right now. Unless like Love gets in a full practice tomorrow and at the same time they give us confirmation that Love's going to be 100%. Now let's hit this refresh button. And looks like we have about 7 more questions. Hey, can I hold my... give me 10 seconds to go, Pete. Let's get through these 7 questions on the site. Obviously, we'll get in any more that are answered or asked, and we'll also answer as many questions in the free chat as we can. Okay, we are back. I apologize. But nonetheless, Puristi says, this one's really tough for me. I'm 2-6 with a super TM. No idea what that last part means. You have a horrendous matchup for Flowers. Obviously, we have some hesitation here with Deontay Johnson coming over as well. Good news, bad news. Good news is obviously we're not expecting Deontay to come in and immediately have some massive role. Bad news is Deontay is no longer on the injury report. I still go Flowers this week, but I think if like Deontay was sitting here last week and plus you had the bad matchup for Flowers, I think you could make an argument to go with Jacoby Myers. Myers, decent matchup going up against Cincy. Not only is it a better matchup here, but also at the same time, your only target competition is going to be Bowers. But all these players sound the same. Now, Flowers, Bowers, Myers. But I think we go with Zay Flowers over Jacoby Myers. Now, Phil, always happy to see you. Here, quarterback, we are going to be playing Dak over Geno. Going over to what we have at the running back position. Here, if Kareem Hunt's good to go, actually, no, we go Breece, Hunt. If Hunt's good, Chase is our pivot option. London and Smith as the must-start receivers. Tight end, we are going to go with Kmet over Andrews with Deontay coming in. We'll go Brian Thomas Jr., and then our pivot option will be Chase Brown. But Brian Thomas Jr. did practice today. He did practice yesterday. So it does look like we have some hope that he is good to go. Now, J Rule coming out with our next question. Says 12-team full PPR, made some amazing trades, and I'm thinking about this or should we increase the depth? This is the easiest deal I've maybe seen all live stream. St. Brown to A.J. Brown is a lateral move, and I do think it's up to you. J.K. Dobbins to Jahmyr Gibbs. Give me Gibbs relatively easily. So, yeah, for sure go with Gibbs and A.J. Brown. Not even close, to be honest. It's a phenomenal trade. Now, Mamba coming out with our next deal. It says start set, where in the flex right now we have Chuba. I would get Chuba out of there, and I'd put in Javonte. Really tough matchup for Javonte. Going to be a much worse spot than what we've seen over the past 2 weeks. But with that being said, Chuba Hubbard's in just as bad, if not a worse offense for this week. I mean, it's just a tough matchup, obviously, for Denver. But you have Jonathan Brooks coming back in, presumably as well. So the usage should come down dramatically for Chuba. And then the other option, if you wanted to get anybody in, would be JSN. But I do think you go ahead and you play Pittman over JSN. Now, Teresa, always happy to see you. Let me go ahead and hook you up with a free trade question, a free start set question. Of course, if you ever want to send anything my way, don't hesitate to. But it says, hey, buddy, keep grinding. I already have Algier on the bench, or I have only Algier on the bench. Williams and Taylor in the lineup. Trade away Flowers for the best depth pieces, where we also have wide receiver that's deep too. Honestly, Teresa, I think you are getting the best side of this deal, and I don't think it's close either, in that with Deontay coming in and thinning out the target share that we should have for Flowers, for me, I would personally think that, I don't know, Chase Brown's a better option than Zay Flowers straight up, where Chase Brown's taking over this starting job in what should be a very good offense here. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Chase Brown and Tank Bigsby. Now, Mamba coming out with a start set. Here, our best options on the bench at the moment are Tyrone Tracy, and that's about it. Can't start Deontay his first week back in, not looking at ETN either. There's no world in we're starting Tracy over Brian Robinson or Kenneth Walker. So really the only pivot that you could look to make is if Tracy is good to go, which he did get in the practice today, so it looks like it is a possibility. If you wanted to potentially try to swing, say, and put Tracy in the flex spot over Josh Downs, I think you can. If you wanted to go Tracy over Downs, you can. But obviously, Downs has a good matchup against Minnesota. But Cosmos, longtime member of the flock, always happy to see you. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start set. Says, currently made a 5-3 team, 5-game winning streak, and looking for the playoffs. Team has no holes, but no real heavy hitters, maybe besides Gibbs. What's the move here trade-wise? Just traded Najee and Dell for Terry. Also, my league's very stubborn with trades, and most 2-for-1 deals for elite players don't work. Well, it is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, 10-team league, so obviously that is the ideal move. If your league mates know what they're doing, it makes sense why they would just go ahead and tell you to hit the road if you try to get any of those deals done. But anyway, our team name is Competitive Eaters. We are currently 8th in the league analyzer. Looking at teams 3 through 10, they are all about the same. It's like, okay, you have 2 juggernauts in this league. This team here has Mixon, Achane, Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Nico. This other team sitting with Lamb, Adams, Kyron, Walker, Brian Robinson, Kittle. But beyond that, everybody is about the same. We are currently sitting at 5-3. So one thing that, of course, we can look to do is we can look to take on some of these assets that are maybe going to be disappointing in the short term, but give us a higher ceiling in the long term if we're specifically thinking for the fantasy football playoff stretch. Now, with that being said, quarterback, obviously there are no adjustments to make. We are currently sitting with Allen. I mean, a quarterback that we can start every single week, regardless of what the matchup is really, you don't need to roster another quarterback. The only time that you would is if you're in a situation in which we have the bye week in week 12, and obviously we need to go through and play somebody then. It's like the only time we're rostering another guy. Now, going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with Jahmyr Gibbs, Aaron Jones, J.K. Dobbins. So we have the elite top 10 back. We have two guys with volume that we can confidently start. I'm going to assume that Gus Edwards is on the IR right now, and that Gus Edwards is a running back that you wouldn't be able to open up a roster spot by dropping. Now, of course, I do think that if you could drop Gus Edwards and open up a roster spot, I would look to do so. But again, it is probably a spot where we can't. Looking at Ty Chandler, however, I think Chandler is very easily a drop in this league. Because in my thought process here, in terms of the rosters that we are wanting to, the running backs we're wanting to put at the bottom end of the roster, we want guys that if we were to see an injury, they can be players that you just immediately get into the lineup. And if you were looking at what we have specifically with Ty Chandler, even if Aaron Jones were to get injured, at that point, Ty Chandler's shown this season to be one of the least efficient running backs in the entire NFL. And he could be in a committee with Cam Akers, considering the fact they go out there and trade for Akers. I think a lot of that has to do with how damn bad Ty Chandler looked. So I would cut Chandler. I personally would pick up Devin Singletary. As the thing is, if Tyrone Tracy were to miss with the concussion, then at that point, I think that you could presumably possibly trade Singletary real quick in a 2-for-1 deal to get an upgrade at wide receiver from a team that potentially needs some short-term running back production. Another running back pickup that you can make is Tajee Spears, where Tony Pollard, it did miss practice this week as well. Now, of course, Spears is by no means a guarantee to play. But if you were to have no Pollard and Spears would be good to go, then at that point, you definitely could look to potentially get Spears in or ship him off for an upgrade elsewhere. And then again, if Gus Edwards is not on our IR, then I would drop both Chandler and Edwards and pick up Singletary and Spears. And yes, I understand that we have both Aaron Jones and Dobbins on the team, but still. Now, going over to what we have at wide receiver, we are currently sitting with Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Terry McLaurin. So presumably, you're right, we don't have the elite wide receiver one. We don't have someone that we can confidently start rest of season as like a top 5 name. But with that being said, you are in a situation in which, since we're 5-3, there is one player that I think could make a lot of sense for us to go out there and try to acquire if we could get them at a discount. Actually, there are 2 guys. Obviously, you could go after Nico Collins. The issue with this is the team that's 7-1 has Nico, so they have absolutely no reason to move off of him. The other player that we could look at getting would be Mike Evans, and maybe you throw T. Higgins in there as well, with Higgins banged up himself. But looking at this team has T. Higgins injured. Now, they do have some wide receiver depth, but they are currently 1-7. So one thing that you could for sure look to do is go and get some of their injured players right now, give them the short-term production, give them somebody like Aaron Jones, and give them somebody like Garrett Wilson, and see if in return we can get back CMC and T. Higgins. I mean, if they don't want Wilson, maybe the game's already played, then send them Harrison, send them McLaurin, but effectively send them any running back and wide receiver combo, not named Jahmyr Gibbs, for the combo of CMC and T. Higgins, and give them the short-term production for the long-term upside. Now, obviously, on paper, I think that trade makes a lot of sense for both parties, where this team's 1-7 dealing with a bunch of injuries. The issue, however, may be on a 1-7 roster. They are completely checked out and they're not wanting to make any moves. Now, going over and looking at this team here. This team currently maybe has Puka banged up. They have Flowers just tanking in value as well. So maybe this is a roster in which we could give them a wide receiver depth piece and we could get Breece Hall in. So maybe if you wanted to see if we could go ahead and send like Terry McLaurin and Aaron Jones and get to Breece, I think that could be very interesting in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league where we have plenty of wide receiver depth. And then the other move that we are looking to potentially make here is I'm trying to figure out what team has Evans. This is the team with Evans. Obviously, you have Evans injured. At the same time, Deebo Samuel is in the bye. If we could maybe go and swing for Mike Evans here, I think that you're a roster where we are planning for the fantasy playoffs. If you could send them like DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley to go get Mike Evans, who presumably will miss weeks 15, will miss weeks 9, 10, and 11. I think we could afford it because we are not dealing with the injuries ourselves. So I think that should be it for all the updates that we have, all the potential trades that we have here. Again, I did hook you up with that free trade question and that free start sit question as well. So if there's anything else that you want to send my way, I would 100% don't hesitate. Just send it. I'd be happy to look at it for you. But yeah, thank you again. I really appreciate you and hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Now let's refresh this, see if we have any more questions on the site that we need to get to before the live chat. We do have 4 questions on the site we need to get to real quick. Of course, I will reiterate, if you ever wanted to get a guaranteed answer over on flockfantasy.com, you can always hit the button in the link in the live chat that says ask a question here. Or you could go hit the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. If you hit that expert advice button, then you're going to be able to ask for a team review, a trade question, a start sit question, a super message, whatever you're wanting. If you do want a full-blown team review, I would highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free CJ Stroud pick, more than less than half a total yard for tonight's game. And you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream that we are doing every night. Now, I have a 31% profit boost token on Underdog right now. I think actually everybody has this for Halloween. So I'm actually going to want to put together a little bit of a pick'em here. I think we showed this earlier in the stream, but I actually like Breece to have a touchdown in this game because you have a vulture protection on Underdog, where even if Breece were to get vultured at the goal line from Braylon Allen, you actually do get a refund there. I only want to be looking at the NFL picks. So we're going to go with Breece to score a touchdown. And then honestly, I think we may just take both running backs to score TDs with the usage that you have from Joe Mixon at this point. Let's go ahead and let's apply the 31% profit boost token that we have here. So after applying that 31% profit boost token, we can go ahead, we can put 10 or let's do $13 to win 41 that Breece and Mixon score touchdowns in this game. And I do want to reiterate, because on Underdog as well, you have the vulture protection. This is why I think these are interesting. If you do get vultured at the goal line for either one of these running backs, then you actually get the pick'em refunded. So we're going to go with $13 to win 41 for Breece and Mixon to score a touchdown in this game. But obviously, if you want to detail us on that, you can find that link in the live chat. And if you are new to Underdog Fantasy, you would actually be able to use a free CJ Stroud pick as well, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight. Just your boy's been on here for years and years and years and years. So sadly, your boy has no shot at getting that free CJ Stroud pick. Now let's move this over to our next question. This one's coming out from Young Stowe. This is a start set where here at running back, we're going to play Nick Chubb over what we have with those secondary options. Wide receiver, Brian Thomas Jr. does practice yesterday and today. It looks like he has a real shot to play. And then we are going to be going with Cedric Tillman as well as DeAndre Hopkins with no Pickens this week, no Nico this week. Obviously, this could look very different in the future. And then your backup pivot will be if Brian, actually, no, never mind. We have Josh Downs. I apologize. We go Downs over Tillman. I didn't see that we had Downs. And then our backup option, if Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't play, would be Cedric Tillman there. But please, if you have Josh Downs and Cedric Tillman, you play Josh Downs. Now, our next question coming out from E. Hartley. Here, this is Hunt, Chase Brown, or Tank Dell. For me, I'm going to go ahead. I will take Kareem Hunt if he is 100% healthy. Obviously, it'll be something that we need to monitor, though. I do think that him, Chase Brown are back-to-back. because you do have just an absolute phenomenal matchup for Chase Brown this week against the Raiders. Now, stay smirking coming out with our next question. Here at tight ends, flex, this is what we are looking at. I would personally go Komet over Hawkinson this week and just give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room there with Hawk. And then in the flex slots, I think we are going to be taking the combo of Jalen Waddle and Tracy if Tracy is good to go. And if Tracy's not, we will pivot over to Zay Flowers, but not super excited to play Zay Flowers. Obviously, it was a boom bust option before the Deontay trade, but now especially, I would expect Deontay to not have a massive role first weekend though. And then Joey Up's coming out with our next question. This is Nico to... This is a downgrade across the board. I mean, Mahomes is maybe slightly better than a streaming option, but not much better than quarterbacks that are be out there on the waiver wire like Kirk Cousins. And if you're looking at what we have with like Nico Collins falling down to Dobbins and Devonta Smith, I think for me, it's going to be the Nico Collins side here relatively easily. Again, I do want to reiterate, once Nico's back in, now post Stephon Diggs trade, it is a possibility that you do have Nico Collins as the wide receiver 1 overall rest of the season. Now, one coming out with our next question says, thoughts on this? This is Kyler and Swift versus Mahomes, Adams, and Pitts. So again, I do want to reiterate that Mahomes is a streaming option at quarterback, not much better than the players that you're going to be looking at off the waiver wire. You've had a total of 0 games this season with 20 fantasy points for Patrick Mahomes. So Kyler to Mahomes, clear downgrade. A Swift to Adams, slight downgrade. I'm sorry, slight upgrade. Depending on your team in reality. We don't have our team link, so I don't know if I can see it. And then we have Kyle Pitts. I think it's a very fair deal. Like, if you had maybe Jaden Daniels too, and you're like, hey, I don't even need Kyler, and I need help at tight end, I could very easily see you going with the Kyle Pitts side of this. But I do want to just be on record. I think going from Kyler to Mahomes is a downgrade. Swift to Adams is a lateral move. And getting Pitts added on comes down to how important that tight end is for you. Now, Jack Beard coming out with our next question says, who do we start in my 2 flex spots this week? So our 2 flexes, we have no Evans. For me, I probably go with the running backs in White and Dowdle. I know obviously Dowdle seems like he hasn't done anything in fantasy in forever. Where 2 weeks ago he was on bye, 3 weeks ago they got boat raced against the Lions. And then this past week obviously missed with the illness, but it sounds like he should be 100%. And it's not like Dalvin or Zeke did anything to really inspire this past week. And again, I do want to reiterate, for me personally, I would be excited to play as many of these options as I possibly could in this game with Dallas and Atlanta, where it currently projects to be the highest scoring game in the league this week. Now, Aza Haria coming out with our next question. It's a 4-4 team redraft. We also have Lamar, CMC, Bigsby, Adams, Smith, Thomas, Laporta. Only running back is Etienne. Okay. Opponent running back is Etienne. For me, going from Higgins to London is a massive upgrade. Going from Bijan and Swift to Breece is an upgrade as well. I think that this is an absolute no-brainer, especially where we consider your team, where you have the strength, where you're able to go out and you're able to get in arguably the 2 best options in this and sell the additional depth. So yeah, if you can, please, let's go ahead and let's take the combo of Breece and Drake London. Now, let's refresh this. So we've gotten through all the questions on the site. Let me pivot over and answer as many questions in the live chat as we can. But please, if you have any questions in the chat, drop them right now. I'd be happy to answer as many as I can. And also, if you have not done so already, please drop a like on this live stream. It looks like about, if my math is correct, maybe 3%, 4% of y'all have done so. So 3 out of every 100 of y'all have hit that like button. Don't know what you're waiting for. Okay. Mrs. New Hyde Park says, with Puka's knee re-injured, should we start Stafford or Cousins? Happy BR1 quarterback format. Week 9 game will decide who goes to the playoffs. So I'm really rooting for you this week. For me, I'm definitely going to go ahead. I will take what you get with Kirk Cousins. Again, I do want to reiterate, right now, sportsbooks have only, we can pull this up together. NFL implied team totals, week 9. And yeah, let's look through this together and try to get some realistic expectations of what we should have with these offenses. So right now, here are the updated projections from sportsbooks in terms of the offenses that are supposed to be best versus the offenses that are supposed to be worst this week. The best offenses, tied number 1, are supposed to be the Bills and the Ravens with an implied team total of 27.5 points. The next best offenses are supposed to be the Falcons, the Chiefs, the Bengals. This is why I think that Cousins is arguably the best option that you could possibly put out there as a streamer at quarterback. Going through and looking at the over-under of this game, it's 51.5 points. Supposed to be the highest scoring game in the league this week. Then after the Bengals, you have the Eagles, the Vikings, the Lions. The Lions typically are up at the very top with projections. It's just a tougher matchup going up against the Packers. The Saints are very high in projections this week, of course, when you have a great matchup going up against Carolina. You have the Rams, you have Washington, Dallas, Seattle, and then you kind of get to once you get to the Seattle range, this is kind of like the mediocre offenses. You have Seattle, Arizona, Green Bay, the Jets, the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Bears. I am surprised to see the Dolphins projected out so low. While I understand that, yes, they got smacked around by the Buffalo Bills the last time they played them. I just don't know. And then going down to the below average offenses, you have the Browns, the Titans, the Texans, the Colts, the Giants, the Raiders, the Broncos, the Jags, the Bucks, the Panthers, and the Patriots. This is why, for me, just in general, you can see these offenses, you don't want to start anybody in if you can help it. New England, clearly we start nobody. The Panthers, we start nobody. Tampa, I would start Cade Otton, and probably that's about it. Not super excited about either running back in a really tough matchup against the Chiefs. The Jags, I would start Brian Thomas Jr., and that's about it if he plays. And Evan Ingram, of course. Bowers in Las Vegas, we would play. Maybe you go with Madison. But these are the offenses where you want to start as many players as possible up here at the top. And these are the offenses that you want to start as few of options as possible down here at the bottom. West Coast says, how do you look that up? All you have to do is go to Google, look up week 9 implied team totals. And there are a bunch of sites that put it out. We're definitely going to have it on flockfantasy.com next season. But just a little bit behind on stuff that we're doing on the site. Obviously, we've done a lot on flockfantasy.com this year. But Cal says, if Brian Thomas Jr. plays, do I bench him for Devonta Smith, Hill, Terry? non-PBR format where we just chase touchdown upside, probably not. Daniel says CJ or Kirk, but I have to drop CJ. I think Kirk's a much better option than CJ this week, but if you'd have to drop CJ, I'd still rather have Stroud rest of season, as obviously he's not going to have as bad of matchups as this going into the future, while at the same time, I don't know, it's a situation in which you will get Nico Collins back in. So don't love it. Burnsy says what to do with Puka. You send up a prayer that he's okay. But we have no idea what happened. All we know is Puka re-injured the same knee that was injured and he had a league practice. We have not had any additional word on what we should expect, what's happened so far. So if you have Puka, if you were like starting like, oh, I was going to go Puka over Garrett Wilson this week, I'd probably pivot over to Garrett Wilson. Obviously, if it's like, oh, I was going to go Puka or Cedric Tillman, you still plan on playing Puka. But let's move this over. And of course, I do want to reiterate, if you wanted to get that free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night, you can take advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting that free CJ Stroud pick for tonight's game, more than less than half a total yard. And you're going to be getting the free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. But it looks like we have about 5 minutes till kickoff. I am probably going to spend the next 20 or 30 minutes passing out candy outside to some trick-or-treaters. So I'll probably miss the beginning of the game. But, of course, I'll be live streaming tonight talking about everything that happened and fantasy football implications. So I hope I get to see you after the game. And I hope that you have a great Halloween if you have any plans tonight.